Be advised, the suspect is armed and considered extremely dangerous.
Welcome to the Safety Doc Podcast with author, radio host, and nationally recognized safety expert, Dr. David Perodin. Join us each week as we discuss the best and most bizarre practices in safety preparation and crisis response. Follow Dr. Perodin on Twitter at SafetyPhD. And remember, the truth will keep you safe.
Hey everybody, it is your good friend Dr. David Perodin from down here in the North Star Recording Studio, wishing you well on this October 3rd, 2022. And it was 71 degrees outside today, so tomorrow will be the same, and Wednesday it will also be in the 70s, extending our summer a little bit longer. Welcome to Bolo, Solitude Surfer, JLM, and of course, Krabby Turtle. Thank you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. The metrics are looking good. We are closing in on that 4,000 hour mark to be monetized, which is kind of a big thing, right? So we are getting there. Thank you so much for watching. Before we start to talk about this week, next week we have guest Megan Asui who will be on the show. So let me bring up the thumbnail for that. Just a second. Okay, here we go. All right, so Megan is going to talk about fitness in chaotic times, and she is a fitness professional in the Seattle, Washington area. So I've been talking to Megan for the last few weeks, and we've been going through roughing out kind of a show outline. But yes, very much looking forward to that. Specifically for my book, The Velocity of Information, I have the chapter in there about the Fitness and Fortitude campaign, which never happened, and it should have, in March and April of 2020. The first thing, right, for a national campaign that would have made sense is to try to get everybody as fit as possible. And nutrition and wellness and all of that didn't happen. But Megan is going to help us understand, if that were to happen, here's what actually motivates people. And that'll be a big part of that show. So Megan, a week from today, will be the guest here on the Safety Doc podcast. That one is running a little bit earlier, 7 o'clock. So I will have the thumbnail and everything out for that within a day or two. But we do have in the house here, believe it or not, I have to mute. There we go. We have the safety cam. Look at that, folks. We've got the safety cam back in the house, and I'm going to move the safety cam. There's the safety cam. Well, hello, safety cam. Look at that. Safety cam's over there. We have the safety cam in the house. So yes, the safety cam is looking at us. So welcome, safety cam. Welcome very much to the house. Here we have the safety cam. So yes, over on side there, safety cam. We'll switch up. So a few things here. Just let me do a welcome, Toy Town. Welcome to our good friend Toy Town. Tonight's show is going to be on swatting, and what swatting is, you probably heard this in the news recently. Swatting, when somebody calls in and says there's an intruder in a school, right? But that person who's making that call, that's a hoax, and the person who's making the call might be 1,000 miles away. And this has been kind of endemic, for the start of the school year. Right? We're going to talk about one day, I think it was September 21st in Minnesota. They had 15 of these called in. So emergency responders are assuming that this is an authentic event. And so, we're going to talk about that because I also taught my superintendent class this past weekend. And we brought it up in class. And what are you being told from your professional organizations? What are you doing locally for this? So yeah, it is pretty intense. So we're going to go back and we'll talk about swatting, and I'll talk about it in the school context, and also what is happening And also kind of what isn't happening in the school context. So, hey, we have Toy Town. Hey, Toy Town. We have a judge on January 6th case got swatted. Oh my goodness, Andrew! Wow. All Pro Leventon falling in. So with his bicycle right there. So yeah, we have biking weather here for the next few days, but I am having concrete poured on the side of my garage and pushed out this concrete pad. And anyway, the long story there is I want to be here when all of that is going on. So let me bring up an image here to give you an idea. So on the side of my garage, I have this concrete pad which had deteriorated over the past, well, many years. We've lived here 20 years, and this pad had been on the side of the garage. So I'm gonna share cam to just kind of give a context here. So thank you for being in the show. Thank you for the thumbs up. Thank you for watching. Again, the show is doing great. We have a terrific guest in line for next week. So what in the world is this? I want to do this. All right. Oh, this is, I see what's going on here. Ah, there we go. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So to give you some context, so obviously this is my garage. We had a concrete slab over here when we moved in, and it was something that we assumed the homeowners just added. What the neighbors told us who lived here at the time we moved in on this property over here. So this fence is like right on the property line. I had this property surveyed and literally like right on the line. So I put this in, by a half foot to make sure there isn't any question ever. But this thing had several cracks in it. And what actually happened is over here, this was built upon sand. So it was concrete on sand, and over here was like a clay and dirt. So this was tilting toward the foundation and actually was kind of burrowing into the foundation or actually damaging the foundation. So the foundation's okay now that it has this pressure off of it, but I needed to get that out of there. Plus, it only came out to about right here. So we pushed it out another about 6 feet. So you can tell like this piece of edging right here, this was the end of the concrete as it went around. So we pushed it out actually about 6 feet, and then we angle it. It used to angle to about right there. We angle it all the way up to the next concrete pad. So the benefit on this is that in winter here in Wisconsin, pulling up in the driveway, nobody can get out on this side of the garage. Garage isn't that big it's two vehicles, and you just can't get out if you're in the passenger side. But if I pull up here, right, and I stop in winter, I'll snowplow, or I will snowplow all of this out. So this will allow anybody to get out without any problem, right? So that was one of the big reasons for doing this. And I really couldn't pull this out much further, because then you run into issues with the property line. And I didn't even, because you never know how long these neighbors are going to be here, right? I don't want to run into issues with some people moving in and saying, it's on our property or it's not. But so yeah, anyway, this will give me an opportunity. I can pull a vehicle over here. This is 9 foot 6 inches. And actually that driveway is only 8 foot on each side. So can easily get a vehicle around and in here if I need to. I've got 2 outlets on this side. Who knows about electric vehicles, right? So hey, it's Vanessa in the chat. Hi, Vanessa. So yeah, this will be, so what they did is they dug all of this out, and they also dug down on the foundation to make sure everything was okay there, because again, that one concrete slab had cracked and was all of these concrete slabs over. This was awful, right? And as the contractor said, it looks like whoever did this just kind of, right, this was just a project they did on a weekend, right? Because it wasn't compacted underneath. And again, that was probably put in actually maybe 25, 30 years ago. So all of that was taken out, and I have steel siding. So I was kind of nervous about that. And I was hoping like none of this would get cracked. These, this is the original 40-year-old slab. So that all held up well. So tomorrow so they brought in several loads of gravel. Like this goes down 4 inches. They dug all of this out 4 inches, and it initially has been compacted. They'll come back tomorrow and they'll compact this one more time, and then Wednesday morning the concrete truck arrives, and they'll pour all of the concrete. Now the truck will. So one of the things I had to specify is the truck will stay on the road because um, pulling a concrete truck onto a driveway, you can crack the driveway and all of that. So the concrete truck will stay on the road. I'm actually going to put my garbage containers down at the end so they won't be able to bring it in. So they're going to do that. And then they'll use a little skid loader, which they actually use to clean all of this out and dig down. They'll use a skid loader bucket to just bring in the concrete and dump it and pour it in here. So yeah, just it's what is going on, and I'm looking forward to it. It's one of those projects where, and let me show you. Let me bring up another angle on it here. So here's what it looks like from the back. So again, this is the side of the garage. It's all steel siding. I found out something really interesting. Steel siding is very hard to have fixed. Like nobody will take dents out of steel siding. And I don't say that because we can see a little skid loader yet here. It's not, the guy didn't dent up the siding, but over the years, this side has acquired some dents, mostly from the neighbor kids and stuff like that, baseball, stuff like that. So I was just kind of checking, like, is there any way to have dents removed? And like, nobody does that. I checked with our insurance company. I checked with like people that remove dents out of cars, and they just said steel siding is very hard to work with for dent removal, and no one was willing to touch it. So I have a few dents in the year. It's not a big deal because like no one ever looks at the side of the house anyway, and it doesn't impact the function of the siding at all. But it was kind of a weird thing because I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. It doesn't sound good. So yeah, I had this, and then also right up here is that concrete curbing that I had installed in June all the way around the house, which is awesome. That replaced the plastic that the squirrels ate, to keep the stones in. And they took all of this out without messing with this at all. This is great. So they'll put a little foam piece in here, so there's a little bit of it, so the concrete doesn't run up right against it, and then I'll cosmetically do something with that, pack in a little sand or something like that. And then over here, like next year, this is between us and the neighbor. I'll clean all of this out and then, put a really nice stone in there. And then actually on the top here, I talked to our neighbor and I said, I'll finish this off. I've got some edging and I'll finish this directly over to your property. And then I'll make sure that I bring in new stones and all of that stuff. They're really cool about it. They're like, yeah, don't worry about it. So yeah, actually, this will be brought up a little bit if you can look. So that red line right there, that is and that's just on the surface or the stuff there. But this red line is where the cement will be. So it will actually be a full 1.5 inches higher than the slab. And actually, the slab you can tell like sink down. So this will be significantly higher, and this has quite a decent slope here. So of course any water is going to run down, and the roof goes up and down here. So there isn't a gutter. There's usually not. I mean, what you got to worry about here is not worry, but there's snow. So there's still 4 inches between the steel siding and the pad. And we live on top of a hill. So there'll never be snow here, right? They will never do that. So Vanessa's saying, did they put drainage underneath? What they did, Vanessa, is they dug this down and they put 4 inches of what you see here, gravel in. So they brought several loads of gravel. So yeah, and we have sandy soil. Then underneath is 100% sand where we live. So, and we're on the top of a hill. We never, ever have standing water at all. Just, it drains away. What originally was here was sand underneath when they removed the concrete slabs. This was sand and a lot of it had eroded. So it was like all tilted in and like it was putting some pressure here on the foundation. Now this is 8 inches thick. So that's just kind of exterior stuff, but that was one of the reasons to remove that slab. And then, So as you can see, like that is 4 inches deep right there. This is 4 inches uniform deep, and then underneath the sand. So drainage won't be a problem, and then they're going to come in tomorrow again with the compactor and go through it one more time and really put this down tight before the pour will happen on Wednesday morning. And that's with a fiber mesh in it. And so this was poured. It didn't have anything in it. No, there wasn't any rebar or anything. So the fiber mesh will give it 3,500 to 4,000 PSI. We're only going to ever park a car over here. So that should be plenty. So yeah, I'm excited about it. And then in spring, of course, bringing in and kind of filling this out and making it look good. But so this goes 9 foot 6 inches. So it looks like it's not. It looks like it's crooked, right? But that's an optical illusion. The fence is crooked, so the fence is not put in on a straight line. That's our neighbor's fence. This is always 9 foot 6 inches from the foundation. So and that's the way the previous concrete was too, and it does follow within. But the fence is actually like right literally on the property line, and the property kind of wedges out like a pizza. So but from the road and stuff, like you'll never notice it, and it's nothing weird. But when you're looking at it, it's like, well, why is that? Well, no, it's still 9 foot, but it'll be nice because it's going to be a little bit higher, and then it'll have a little more of a slope to it. The other stuff was just trash. So yeah, this is what was back in there, this little skid loader, and he was pulling stuff in and out. So the concrete truck will be out on the road, and then the skid loader in the bucket, they'll put the concrete and bring the concrete in. And then this tree or this fire bush, that's about a foot distance there. So I think what I'm going to do in spring is I'm going to take this fire bush and move it up about 20 inches toward the road. It's 15 feet from the road right now. So I think I'm going to move it up about 20 inches. So I have like so I can take a lawnmower like through this area right here. But anyway, it's going to be great when it's done. It was just it broken, like the chunks of it would be up 1.5 inches, and it was moving, and it had this fulcrum effect. It was damaging the exterior of the foundation here. Again, that's just cosmetic. That's 8 inches wide and like 4 foot deep. And this isn't a load bearing wall anyway. But it's going to look really nice. And also, like if we do like a barbecue, a grill and stuff, being able to put a grill out here is going to be awesome. Of course, being able to just, swing a vehicle over here and yeah, if we ever need to do that, that was a reason to do this. But yeah, just making this a functional space, because otherwise this never went out that far. It just kind of terminated like right about here. So it was completely not functional. The reason the guy put it in, who was a pastor, by the way, who had this house built in 1978. He bought a boat, and then he had this slab poured over here, and that's where he put his boat. So, but I'm excited about it because I think it'll look really nice, because it looked horrible what was over there. It completely was non-functional, and it never went out far enough up here, so you could never do anything that made sense with it, right? Like like swing a vehicle over. And then in winter, again, when I'm bringing my vehicle, my car up, and it's like my wife, her kids are going to get out. It's like they have to get out into a snowbank. I can kind of plow over somewhat, but now I can clearly, like, I'll probably plow from like this outlet over, and then this will all stay snow. There's no reason to in winter to do anything back here. But the other thing is, I wanted to make this so I think I'm going to stack firewood out here, not this year, but next year. And I would do it like kind of in like this area, so keep it far enough away from the siding, so if it did anything fell, like it's not going to dent the siding or mar the siding. But I think I would take this corner, like right here, probably put down some 2x4s, right? And I would stack maybe about 4 feet high, not any higher than that, but 3 cords maybe out there. And then that would be my first burn. So I'm getting out there before we have a lot of snow. So maybe early November, early December. And then I would start to go into my basement, because like it just takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of space in my basement. But I think I would do this as my first burn pile, like right over here, which would be really nice. So yeah, so I've got some ideas kind of planned for this. But they found all kinds of crazy stuff under here, by the way. They found they found like edging, like plastic edging was under the concrete. They found like, pieces of metal under, and they found like huge, like football sized stones were under here, which also like made the concrete pad unstable. So, when they dug down, they dug down at least 4 inches below all this, if not 5 inches. And over here toward the foundation, they dug this down, about 2 feet to just check the foundation to make sure everything was okay, which it was. And then, but yeah, so I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to having this done. It had been something on my wish list for quite a while. JLM says, looks like it's a steep grade. So let me go back here, buddy. So the door to here is a pretty good drop. Here to here is 1/8 inch every foot. So I don't know what is that, 9 feet. So about 1.5 inches. So it is a good drop, which is for drainage, right? Because then this goes with my neighbors, and really, like, it's, if I did park a vehicle over here, that's not a problem. And if I do, put firewood over here, I'll just stack it accordingly. But I want it to have a drop because I don't want any water coming toward the foundation. And so that's why we did kind of exaggerate the drop a little bit, because again, it's sandy soil and all of that. And I will fill this in with a self-leveling caulk next summer. Whatever the gap is here, I will go and put down some backing rod, and then, do self-leveling caulk all the way along here. So, but it'll look good. It'll look great, actually. It's just so nice. I mean, because I sit like right over here most of the time. I sat out there tonight actually with my chair. So yeah, let's do this. We're not going to spend all day here on the stuff, but so this is what it looks like as you're coming into the garage, right? So it previously this joint was the end. You would it slanted from here to like right there where this piece of edging is. So it went over, and this was all cracked and stuff like that on this side. So like a gain 6 foot, and then also like all the way out to here. But you can tell it gets really close to where I did these hand scalps myself. I still have some extra stone, these scalps. So this will look a little odd for a while. And the fire bush is really doing great. So I'll have to take my time in spring and dig out the fire bush, and then just move the fire bush about 20 inches and recast all of the scalp stone. But that's not a big deal. I can do that. So yeah, the driveway is in great shape for being 40 years old. I mean, there's just little cosmetic marks from when they came in and out here, but the driveway is not cracked. And so, yeah, this will, from here over, that's 11 feet. And the driveway is, these pads are only 8 feet wide. So it's kind of an optical illusion. This is, 3 foot wider. And again, just longer. And I kind of like this. I sit literally, guys, I sit in my, there's my bike back there, by the way. There's my bike. There's a boombox I got in 1984, a JVC. Bought that new from Camelot Music. So two tape decks on that thing. But yeah, I sit right here, all of, June, July, August. And I sat out there tonight in my lawn chair. And now it's like, boom, I've got this area. And like right here, this is, first of all, you can see you can pull a vehicle in without any problem. No problem there. But like, this will be great for grilling, right? Because I don't want to grill in the back, because I do have a porch back there. But the problem is I have a 3-season porch with mesh, which is to keep cats from clawing it up and stuff like that, which works great, but I don't want any heat near that. Of course, we got steel. This is all steel siding. So, if I put my grill like right here, I'm in business. Like now I have a nice grilling area where, I don't have any heat that's going to be near the garage. And so it's just a win-win. So this is a project I wanted to, I had this quoted out last year, and then I don't know what happened. The guy got busy or something like that. But anyway, so you guys are like, holy smokes, Doc, you're talking a lot about this. It's a big thing. I'm excited about it. So on Wednesday, they come in and they do that. So let's go back to the chat here. So they didn't find Hoffa, Ron Wayne. No, they didn't. It's always interesting in my town because we are the third oldest city in Wisconsin, and well into the 60s, when they would build houses and roads, they would find bodies because people were buried all over. This was Native American land of the Winnebago and also first settlers here. So it was pretty common to, put an addition on your garage and you find two skeletons, right? So that isn't as common anymore, but no, nothing on this side of the house. But they just obviously just I think they had a garden there at one time, and then they just put the slab on top of it and just a lot of junk and stuff like that. So so welcome, Ron Wayne. Welcome to CNT. CNT, look behind me, because one of these days, buddy, your safety dock design is going to be back there, and I'm going to kind of rearrange everything that's back there to make that the centerpiece. So scoop. Dun, dun, dun. So welcome, Ron Wayne. And again, next week we have Megan Usui on the show. So that's going to be a great one. Hey, it's a bacon. Do Blazing Saddles. It might have to be a watch party on Discord. Oh my goodness. I have the original DVD. Well, I have the DVD of the unedited versions of Blazing Saddles. I heard, Ron Wayne, I heard that some here just got home, time for class, work, beers, and good shows. All right, Vanessa, I missed the watch party again, exhausting. Oh no, Vanessa, sorry you caught a cold. It was 71 today, and it's going to be 72 tomorrow, and I think 74 to the day they pour the concrete, but then it drops to 59 and like 29 overnight, but I don't think that'll be an issue because the ambient temperature of the soil and stuff will still be warm, and then it bounces back up into the 60s. So it's actually a good time for pouring concrete because it's not really hot. You want a little bit of a slower cure, but so let's check. Misty, Mrs. Wayne, welcome. Coughing and sore throat. Oh no. Well, take care. Okay, so something else. So I ordered a new headset. So these are headphones, and I forget which these are LYX, and they've been good, but they're starting to kind of wear out and stuff like that, and this is kind of basic headset. So, but actually headphones. But I ordered a headset. And it is a HyperX Cloud 2. They had it on sale for like $73. It's usually $100. And I asked the head of Wisconsin gaming for esports, I asked Mike, I said, what's a good headset where, with the microphone and stuff like that? He's like, HyperX, like go with that. And they have these on sale, and it's USB. So it's like, boom, everything I need. They'll arrive on Wednesday. So I think the next show I am going to ditch my Yeti, and I'm going to try, when I have the show Monday with Megan, I'm going to try to do the heads. I like that look. I like the look. It looks like an NFL announcer. I like using my headset. The problem with my current headset, my $30 Logitech 390, it's a good headset, but because it has the small kind of ear things that sit on the ear, your ears get sore, after an hour or two, and it, the audio quality is okay. It's not great. So I think I'm going to have a significantly better quality with the HyperX headset, which will have the microphone right and the headphones. So that'll be here for Monday's show. So, hey, I wanted to share with you also that there is another David Perodin. He's David D. Perodin, and he's in Thailand, but he speaks English. So we both are in education. We both study linguistics. So it's kind of crazy. And I received an email. I frequently receive emails from people trying to contact him. He publishes a lot. Like, so his Google Scholar page is like, it's endless, right? And he's a great guy. So he's always, conferences and just doing I've watched him through YouTube. He really does a lot of great stuff. So someone sent something to him, but they sent it to my email address. So I took it and I forwarded it to him at his university address. He teaches in Thailand. And he got back to me and he's like, hey, thank you. And also he said, I've been watching the podcast, right. And some of your work and appreciate it. And I said, no, I appreciate you, because if anyone's doing a search for me online, they probably find your Google Scholar page, which, has like 300 articles on it. And they're like, holy smokes, look at the safety doc. But yeah, so that is something. Yeah. He's David D. Perodin. I'm David P. Perodin. But if you just type in David Perodin, and there's a lot of similarities, like in the things that we do. So it's kind of a neat thing. So yeah, I taught that university course on Saturday, and a great class. It was Oktoberfest in La Crosse, Wisconsin, which has the world's biggest 6-pack, by the way. And so when you leave class, and I alerted my students to this, I said, when you leave, there'll be tens of thousands of people walking on the streets. So, and maybe not all as alert as they should be. So like your exit from campus will be very slow, which it is. People are friendly, they're happy, but you're really moving at a snail's pace as you exit campus and try to get back to like the interstate or something like that. So I got a kick out of it, because the last 2 years I've had class on Oktoberfest, and it's been warm and sunny, so everybody's out. But one of the things that we covered in class, and it was a terrific class. I think I've improved my teaching this year. I've incorporated more interactive activities. One activity I included was having students break up into groups of 2, right? The whole class, and say, you're going to testify before your legislators, which happens in our state, but no one had testified before their legislators on school budgets or whatever it was, regarding school issues. And I gave them this outline. There's 4 points in it, because I've done this a number of times, right? I said, first thing is you introduce who you are and why you're qualified to testify. And your qualifications aren't your resume necessarily. So, but you do that. And the second thing you say is, I am in support of this bill, or I'm opposed to it. That's it. Third thing is you have a personal story. And the fourth thing is you have a fact. Which can be local or like a national fact. It's kind of irrefutable, right? Like you can kind of cite it, and that's it. You have 4 minutes to present. So I split people into groups, and then I said, work as a team, and then whoever's going to speak. And, they came up in front, and I put this timer out in front of them, and I had to count up to 4, because I didn't want to do like where it counts down to 4 and it beeps, because that's kind of annoying. I think it's kind of unprofessional. And they said, if you present, like, do they like cut you off at 4 minutes? And I said, no, they'll tell you like you have 30 seconds to go, and right, you have to wrap things up, right? They're not going to let you speak another minute or two, but I said, it's informal, but it's kind of intimidating, right? Because it's state capitol and before committee, and but I wanted people to experience what that was like. So I had them do that. And then I actually did a testimony that I gave. I said, and I gave this testimony so they could see it. And I said, I think this is a professional expectation of you at this stage of the game as a superintendent. And if you're not being asked to do this, I would contact your representatives, your organizations, right? Or your legislators in your area, and say, hey, anything comes up with school safety, school funding, these areas, please call me. And if I'm able to testify, right, I definitely will, which is about 4 minutes. So out of these 2 groups, then they appointed one person to testify. So they're testifying before a committee. So they're just advising the committee, right? And I said, it kind of seems intense, but like no one's going to cross-examine you, and they'll record, and you only need a sheet of paper. Like you're not going to read things off. it's not as formal as you think it is, but still it needs to be very professional. So I think it can be professional and informal. So they each appointed someone from their groups to do this. And then after each person got done presenting, we applauded. And I think that's a very key part of teaching, right? Because whoever is presenting, whoever is going out and is doing this, and testifying, and as I said, like if you actually did this right, you practice this several times, and but here, I just want you to get the format of how this would work, right, and kind of get a feel for it. And none of them had done this before, which is kind of weird because like I've done this many times, and I think it is an expectation, and I don't think their organizations utilize them enough to do this. And then also on their part, they need to contact their organizations and say, I'm willing to do this. So let me know, which is basically driving to the state capitol and coming in and be called to testify. You have to be on a list to testify on a bill and stuff like that. So I said, there isn't any cross-examination. Don't worry about it. So when each person got done, there was a round of applause because I wanted the person to feel good, right? And both of them did a great job because you're kind of putting yourself out there a little bit to present. But that was a really great thing. It's something new I added to class, and I'm actually going to revise my syllabus and talk with the dean because I said, I think not self-advocacy, but just like, what would I say? Professional advocacy or advocacy in the field is missing from the curriculum. And not that that's necessarily required to be there, but I think it's an enhancement of the curriculum to teach people how to do that. And, through writing a journal article or through testifying, at a state level or meeting with one of your legislators, and, you don't have to be on PBS like the doc here, but, so yeah, that was a great thing. I'm glad I added it in. And I'm going to again change things so we do that more often. So one of the case studies this week in my superintendent class was about emotional support animals. And get this. So I said, emotional support animals, this is pretty frequently, happening in schools, right? Like emotional support, snake, chicken, and like a sugar glider squirrel are kind of like the big three. Obviously a dog too, but a dog is typically a service animal. And so some people had some experience with this. And one of my students, I said, look at your Board of Education policy, because a lot of times the policy will say the superintendent will make the final decision. And they're like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm a superintendent, and I probably wouldn't be the person making that decision, to be the principal or the whatever. So this one superintendent, great student, right? He looks through his policy and says, oh my goodness. He said, Dr. Proden, the policy states the superintendent will make the determination on whether the emotional support animal is allowed on school premises or not, right? So I'm like, yeah, so as a superintendent, you need to know this. And also, like, if that's in policy, you need that revised. That shouldn't be you as a superintendent making that call. That should be the director of special education or the building principal making that call, because they're closer to the situation than you are. But I said, yeah, and again, most of the times these things work out and stuff like that. So we're kind of going through, what it means to have an emotional support snake in your school. But that was a great activity. It was just so timely. And actually, we also talked about esports in Wisconsin, and I brought in my controller from my PlayStation, and I brought it out as I started to present, and I pretended I was playing and stuff like that, and as I'm doing like the whole thing here about esports in Wisconsin. And there's a company in Milwaukee. You can go, they'll customize controllers for students with disabilities. If the student has like tremors or something, they'll make an adaptive controller. And I'm sitting there the whole time, and I'm doing this, and I'm pretending like I'm playing, which it was just a really cool effect, right? And so I'm trying to do like cooler things just as a person. I'm not trying to like be artificial or anything like that, but I think it gets people's attention, right? To do these types of things. And I'm really having fun this fall. I've taken a kind of a nuanced, a Renaissance approach to my teaching. And I think I've really, I think this is the best year of teaching I've had in 19 years. So I wanted to add one more thing. I'll go back to the chat. I had back and forth messaging with my friend Phil Henry in Germany, who was a guest on the show. He's going to be a guest on the show again. And Phil Henry talking about what's happening in Germany. He took a video of this for me. There's streetlights in order to save electricity in Germany. Their streetlights will be on for 1 minute and then they'll be off for 1 minute and then they'll be on and then off. And it's completely, all the streetlights are toggle that way. So he sent me a video and he said, again, to save power. But the other thing is, so he said, these are older streetlights that operate off of ballast. So it's like old fluorescent lights. Like I have LED lights down here in the studio, but if you have a ballast light and you're turning it on and off every 60 seconds, you're going to fry that ballast. Like it's just not going to last as long. So this whole thing of saving energy is just really weird, right? Because you're just destroying those ballasts and all of these lights by doing that, 60, 30 times an hour to toggle these things on and off. But he had the video. He said, watch this, Doc. He said, this is what's being told. We're going to, I don't know if you're driving, like how that all works. Like 60 seconds, the lights are on, then 60 seconds, the lights are off. It's weird. It's weird. But again, Phil is a great face validity guy. So he's like, here's the actual video. This is what they're doing. So yeah, so good stuff. Let me go over to the chat and then we'll get into school swatting, skyrocketing in America. Let's go over here to the chat. Vanessa saying dropping to 40 or less now here each morning. So yeah, we'll be at 32, I think, in a Friday morning, and then we'll be back in the 40s in the morning, and then like 60s all of next week. So it's been 70 here today. It'll be 70 tomorrow, 70 the day after. So like for concrete, I'm in good shape because I'm never going to hit a point here in the next, 5-8 days that'll be below freezing, which would be bad, could be bad for concrete. The slower concrete cures, the stronger it is, right? So that's why in Hoover Dam they ran through the water, the ice cold water, piping and stuff like that to cool it down. But yeah, to pour concrete here in October is actually a good thing. Because you're going to end up with stronger concrete. So, by the way, this mic will be replaced with a Shure MK7. The headphones will be replaced, and I have a new camera that'll be coming in the end of the month. A Logitech, and so there are a number of most of the technology here is going to be updated in the studio by the end of the month, and. So that's cool. That's cool. So let's see here. Hey, Z, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Hi, Doc and all. Hey, buddy. There's a David D. Proden and your middle initials P. There's an evil. Yeah, I knew. So this guy is really good. So when I sent him an email, and we've been emailing kind of back and forth, just a little bit of like, hey, I think this was intended for you, and no, it was intended for you. And he is just this crazy academic as far as like his Google Scholar page is like, here in 2022, I've published like 18 articles, so much respect. The guy is ultra professional and he's a fun presenter. And so like for me, as I told him, I said, I benefit if anybody lands on the stuff that you do and they think it's me. I'm in much, they're like, oh my goodness. But yeah, it was something he did with a published paper, and then the publisher or whatever was getting back to him, and I was like, oh, this isn't for me. This is for you, buddy. But he lives in Thailand. He speaks English. I think he's from Great Britain. So yeah, it is pretty cool. And the fact that he's getting his PhD in applied linguistics. And I think he said in 2023, he'll have his PhD. And I have a PhD in speech language pathology, specializing in psycholinguistics and semantics. So like a very similar area. But I told him, I said, you have a standing invite to be on the show. Just let me know. At Traveling Foods, you and me both. We have Traveling Foods in here. So I'm not sure what this says. Yo, hey, it's Traveling Foods. Well, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you, Traveling Foods. Again, we're going to have the Shure MK7 mic in here very soon. Saw your community post about this. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. Bacon. There he is, posting the link, Traveling Foods. Doc isn't far from me his watch channel. So yeah, I appreciate that. I think we've done the Monday shows, we've done the Monday posts, done a couple of YouTube shorts, which have, done pretty well. I think a couple of 5,000 views. So I plan to record the cement pour. So maybe there'll be something in there. Hopefully, it's hopefully uneventful, that I can bring into a YouTube short. Bacon's community page is a must for new channels. So cool. Doesn't matter. We're going to call him Evil Doc. Well, you can. Thailand is crazy fun. Yeah, he's a professor over there in Thailand. So yeah, it is weird. And this isn't, I've known about this guy for a while, but we do have many similarities, right? Professor at a university and linguistics background and, published and stuff. And then actually he shared with me, he said, I've been using some quotes out of the Velocity of Information in my classes, in communications and linguistics. I've been using some quotes from your book. I'm like, well, thank you, buddy. Appreciate that. So yeah. So today, today's show is, it's not brought to you by Dismore's IGA. At least I don't think it is, but let's get into today's show. So today's show is School Swatting is Skyrocketing in America. We're going to talk about what it is and what can be done to stop it. So the start of the 2022-23 school year has been marred by a flurry of swatting-type threats targeting schools across the nation. A swatting threat is when someone, perhaps 1,000 miles away, contacts law enforcement, makes a false report that an active shooter is on the school campus. In Minnesota, police responded to swatting reports at 14 different school districts on September 21st, right? So 2 weeks ago. In this episode, we'll define swatting. What is it? Identify its origins, examine the impacts on schools and communities, and measures being taken or considered to reduce swatting. By the way, when we moved here about 20 years ago, there was a SWAT incident 1 block away from us, right down the road. Somebody had called in right from 1,000 miles away, and I think it was video game related or whatever, but the whole block was shut down, and police and barriers and all this stuff, emergency responders. And that was like 20 years ago, and it turned out right, it was a SWAT that was going on. So what is swatting? So per the Seattle Police Department, swatting is a crime. For those unfamiliar with the term, swatting is the act of creating a hoax 911 call, typically involving hostages, gunfire, or other acts of extreme violence, with the goal of diverting emergency public safety resources to an unsuspecting person's residence. So, right, probably the most common or one of the most known on the internet is like Tim Pool, right? So people calling in and saying, oh, there's a shooter event happening at this YouTuber's residence. And then, of course, police are responding to that. So that's what it is. Now, in schools, again, this has been just horrible to start off the school year. Nothing like this in previous school years. So actually, when I was thinking about my next school safety PBS presentation, the trilogy that will be in 2025, it's probably going to involve some level of swatting, deep fake avatars, and I'm not quite sure, but we're getting out of the age. We're moving beyond like the physical environment security and stuff like that into much more of the cyber security aspect of school safety. It's just deep fake avatar realism, deep fake potential imposters, right? Having a video of a student or a staff member and saying, here's what they said, here's what they did, when they authentically didn't say that. So we're moving into that era. So it'll be interesting because in 2013, it was more of the history of kind of school violence, and it was very mechanical at that point. In 2019, we started to get into the mental health side on PBS presentation, and also the deepfake avatars. And really in 2025, I think, is when the trilogy will be. That is largely going to be cyber safety in schools, what's happening. So anyway, as of April 2022, popular YouTuber Tim Pool has been swatted 8 times during his live stream politically themed shows. So what is the origin of swatting? So by the way, I have my notes monitor to the left, and my you are in front of me. And so anyway, over here's my notes monitor, and then my kind of stream monitors over here on the right. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, by the way. Dun, dun, dun. So what is the origin of swatting? Swatting has been around for decades, but the implementation of the 911 emergency number, advances in cellular phone and burner phones, and online technology along with social media, swatting is becoming more sophisticated and happening more frequently than any time in history. So really, before social media and before cell phones, swatting was pretty rare because you'd likely have to use a landline or a payphone to call in, and it was just unlikely people were going to do that. It happened. So we're thinking like pre-2005-ish. It happened, but not with any regular consistency. And it might happen to like one person, but it wasn't happening to like 15 schools or something like that, all in the same day in the same state. So let's go back. In June 2009, a blind 19-year-old hacker named Matthew Wagman was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to charges of computer intrusion and witness intimidation. The FBI first began investigating the teen after a 2005 swatting incident in which Wagman staged a hostage hoax, sending police to the home of a woman who had refused the teen hacker's request for phone sex. So, whoa. Okay, so we go back kind of 2005 for one of these kind of sentinel cases of swatting. In 2017, a fatal swatting incident occurred in Wichita, Kansas, when Shane Gaskell was shot and killed by police after exiting his swatted upon house. The motive was revenge swatting due to a disagreement in the online video game Call of Duty. So he's playing somebody in Call of Duty, whatever, they have a disagreement. That person then calls in and, Shane Gaskell and whatever has a weapon and stuff like that, or he's threatening. Police come in and Gaskell comes out on his porch. And I think they told him to put his hands up, and he put his hands down. And I don't know all the details of it, right? But then he was killed. He was shot and killed. So the thing is, in most cases today, it's very difficult to find out who placed the swatting call because of burner phones, right? And so a lot of these cases, they never find out who placed the call. So the impact of swatting on schools. This fall, we've had more swatting on schools than we've ever had. Again, people calling in saying there's an intruder at the school, they have a weapon, this is going on, or whatever, and they hang up. And that person could be 1,000 miles away. They're just, I don't know, picking a school at random, whatever they're doing. But again, they could be a student who's going to that school. But per Kenneth S. Trump, president of National School Safety and Security Services, who I think is, I quoted Ken in my book, School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America. Ken, I think, is the top expert in school safety. So it's a person I would recommend. So Ken is saying school swatting has become much more common in the past 5 years. These incidents not only instill fear and panic throughout school communities, they are also very costly in first responder manpower time and taxpayer dollars. Sadly, they pull away from first responder manpower resources needed for credible emergencies elsewhere in communities. The trauma impact on students, staff, and parents of communities is also palpable and might have lasting effects. So it's increased the last 5 years in schools. This year has been unlike anything we've seen before. So if you know of any schools that have been swatted in your area, post down below in the comments. Or if this ever happened to you, right? If you were in school. So Andrew, time to leave a review. Andrew. That was meant for Andrew. Um, Ian deserves to get swatted. He ruined Tim's show. So, Andrew, that happened twice a year ago. I went to Inglewood High. This is Bacon. They just let everyone out from the football field. It's almost have looked forward to it. Early day out. I was never in a school that was swatted. I was in a school that had a bomb threat called, and we all had to exit to the gymnasium. I'm not sure what happened after that, but that was like middle school. So, nerds are ruining the world. Nerds. Adams College. Nerds. So, Albert Leventon. Also, a lot of people in foreign countries make the calls from hostile countries. Absolutely, right? This doesn't have to be from the U.S. The call can be outside of the U.S. So it can, it's kind of endless, right? You can find schools just by doing a search. If you are on social media, there was a student in a school district in Wisconsin who was, get this, posting online, hey, like, I want to get out of school for the day. I have Bitcoin, and if you post the thread or whatever, I'll pay you whatever Bitcoin. So that was a case here in Wisconsin. So you're absolutely right. So Corn Pop is saying Corn Pop's revenge. Still no power. Just been cleaning things up and helping people get off the island. Oh man, sorry to hear that. Yeah, that is awful. I've done shows in the past with Katie Pashon of Cajun Navy Relief. I think we did 3 shows total. I know Cajun Navy Relief is one of the resources to help out after hurricanes and especially hurricanes, right? Tropical storms that are hitting the southern U.S. So I personal rant on this thing, this situation. I just think FEMA is structured incorrectly. I think FEMA should be a much stronger brokerage of resources. So example, like FEMA would keep roads open and would say, here's warehouses where Cajun Navy Relief, Texan, Navy Relief, like, come in here, and stage your assets, right? Your boats and your crews to help out and things like that. And I just think it's a big missing piece. And I also think we should have a domestic emergency response team. I've felt this way for years, but especially after the again, last year, the tornadoes that swept through Kentucky and Tennessee, the fire right before Christmas in Superior, Colorado. Like, we should have, sorry if this mic will be replayed. The mic's kind of on its last leg here, but we should have a national FEMA response team. And and I think it should be staged. It should be just a branch of the military, which is out of, whatever, fort. Maybe you have 2, in the U.S. And the purpose is to mobilize and to be there for 14 or 15 days. And then that's it. They go back, right? Or they do the next thing. But they are coming in, and this is where Flying Rich and I had this talk about, if you had a 3D printer, right, and you were bringing stuff in, like, you could 3D print a ton of things, including medical supplies, catheters, and parts for a geodesic dome and stuff like this. But, we don't do that, right? Like, there's so much capacity to do that. But I think there should be these two kind of civilian military units that also provide this rapid civilian response. But then it does sunset, like, after 15 days. They're not perpetually into this, kind of like the Caspar Weinberger doctrine of the 1980s, right? That's to foreign countries. Like, you don't put your military in foreign countries for months at a time for kind of humanitarian things. But anyway, I think there's a lot of merit to it. If I was ever appointed to the head of the FEMA organization, right? If I was head of FEMA, that's what I would do, without a doubt. And they would be, again, in talking with Cajun Navy Relief and Katie Pashon, I mean, the number of times that FEMA had gotten in the way of rescues. I think FEMA's incorrectly structured, and it should be a brokerage of these rescue services, and also the facilitating and obtaining areas to stage assets. I think that should be their role. So I don't know. Maybe we'll bring Katie back on and we'll talk about that sometime. But yeah. So Corn Pop is saying, and so Floridians take care of each other. Yeah. So right. That's a great thing. That is a great thing. Traveling foods, exactly, Corn Pop. Sawzall and a pock axe is a must if you're sheltering in the attic. Yeah, no, you're right. Sawzall will get you out of there if you have to get on top of your house. But I remember it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago when our area got hit by like a tornado and really severe straight line winds. By the way, my neighbors removed their 2, 80 plus year old oak trees, which makes, like, if we had another storm, like one of those would have, any of those fall, like they're going to damage our house and probably their house. But yeah, this makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah, Sawzall and pock-axe. I went down and I helped our neighbors, and I worked for like 2 days. And a couple things I learned from that. One was have a good pair of work boots because I had Red Wings, which are good quality, but they never fit really well. And as I worked for 2 days in those, like, it just killed me. Like I put those boots up for sale, and like no one even bought them yet at a rummage sale. Like $160 boots, and I'm asking like $10 for them. Try them on, but have a comfortable pair of boots is one, and then have good saws, right? And because that was probably the most saws, and then also my wheelbarrow. My wheelbarrow was like gold. Like nobody had a wheelbarrow in my neighborhood. So, you're cutting stuff up and then putting a wheelbarrow, moving it to the end of the curb, toward the end of the curb so people can pick it up and stuff like that. But that was just amazing. Like, nobody had a wheelbarrow. And I have like this industrial wheelbarrow, right? So saws and a wheelbarrow, and just, be ready to go. But more states should have volunteer state guards. You're right. You're absolutely right, all pro Leventon. So they should. And so Cajun Navy relief, and we think of Cajun Navy. So that's one thing, right? Cajun Navy is kind of a generalized term. Let's go over here. This is Cajun. Holy smokes. I got both me in here. Cajun Navy Relief is a formal nonprofit, right? And here you can get in. Here's how to request a rescue, and they use. So, but this is New Orleans. This is where Katie Pichon is affiliate, right? So, but yeah, Cajun Navy Relief. So one of the things that was happening with Cajun Navy Relief during like hurricanes Irma and Harvey was FEMA wasn't helpful. So Cajun Navy Relief would say, we've got the boats, we can come into these areas, and FEMA would say, well, we're not going to cooperate with you or whatever. But FEMA didn't have the boats to supplement these areas, right? And also there was a big confusion with drones back 5-6 years ago, like commercial and hobby drones. People would come in with Cajun Navy Relief or just on their own and say, like, we can use these drones to help search and rescue or kind of grid out an area on this. And they'd be like, nope, no drones flying, right? And that has changed somewhat, and drones kind of work now in a mosaic pattern, but it's just stupid, right? If you have the asset and you can use it, then just do it. It was just nuts. And that's where I and Katie, has done a ton of work, not only getting resources to people, but then she comes back with Cajun Navy Relief a month later or two, like, and helps people rip out their drywall and replace and help rebuild their houses and stuff like that. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. If you haven't given a thumbs up here, we have 15, which is awesome, but maybe we can get 20. It'd be great. I appreciate it very much. So let me do this little shameless plug right here. So this is the most honest book ever written about the $3 billion school safety industry, which is really about $5 billion right now. It's out there in a hard copy. It's also in paperback, ebook, and audiobook that I narrated which you can get for $10.99 on downpour.com and many other sites. It's on Audible too. It's a little bit more on Audible. Audible sets its own price for books, even though I set the price at $10.99 at Audible, you know. And so you get to hear Doc narrate the book in 6 hours. If you listen to me narrate, which is a pretty cool thing. So yeah, but this book is $20 or $22 a paperback, and it's through a professional publisher, right? It is under contract, so it's a paperback. It's not going to fall apart when you open it. So yeah, it's really good quality paperback, which actually I kind of like the paperback, but you can get a hard copy of this book for like $30. But paperback is $22 and the ebook is $10.99. And you have a really nice companion document I put together for the ebook. So please check out School Bears. The other one is, hey, Velocity of Information. This is the book I released in April of 2022 through my publisher. Even thinking during chaotic times, wow, like this book, remember one day we all woke up to find ourselves essential or non-essential per our government. That's all in this book. There's many, photos and diagrams and how people react during extended periods of chaos. You're thinking, well, maybe, you've got all this under control. And there's a lot of history in this book too, like Roosevelt's fireside chats and the medium as the message. And maybe you do, like, maybe you've got it under control, but maybe you see somebody in your family, right? And they're like, oh God, they're not handling this well. They're not handling inflation and, the instability in the economy, and they're freaking out. There's a lot of stuff in this book that you're going to be able to apply to them to help stabilize them. So, right. There's a photo I took of the playground that was closed down during the pandemic next to our house. And so this is an awesome book. Nothing like it out there. This is 471 endnotes. I interviewed Clay Martin, Concrete Jungle, in this book. There's 12 interviews total in this book. So it's conversational. It's kind of like a fireside chatty type thing, but again, really well cited. And I think it will help. It'll entertain you. You'll find things in here, things that will resonate, but it's also going to help you as you interface with people maybe around you in your family or in your community that aren't as kind of stable as you are with what is happening right now, right? What to say to them, what activities they can do, how you can interface with them, things like the member check, right? You get 5 people together from different parts of the country and you start to share information. You significantly increase your accuracy level of what you believe is happening. And you kind of, turn off the TV and use this. So it's a great book. And just want to underscore that for you, that one is out there. That will be out in audiobook in April 12th. It's done already. It's kind of one of these quirky things per contract. That audiobook has to come out on the 12th. So funny this came up. Doc interviewed a guy who wrote Concrete Jungle, I think Clay Martin, yes. And he also owns a company called Rooftop. So yeah, actually it's 2 different things. So I did interview Clay Martin. So Clay Martin has several books. He has a new book that just released. Let me bring it up here so we don't do the Amazon. Here we go. Da-da-da. Let me do this. Okay, so Clay Martin was interviewed. He was also a guest on the show, but he's interviewed for the book Wrath of Wendigo. So it already has 92 reviews. Look at that. So this is, he has several books that he's published, including Concrete Jungle. So yes, this one released on September 20th. So there we go. Clay Martin. So I interviewed Clay Martin, former military, and when, and Clay talked about in the book of fatigue, right? After being out 60, 90 days on patrol, like 2 examples he gave is one, he went out and he forgot to put bullets in his gun. And another time they retrieved a mortar. And as they were checking it out, there was actually like a tear gas canister inside of it. And then it set his ghillie suit on fire. And I mean, just things like you wouldn't do initially in deployment, but as you hit as fatigue points set in, you start to make these mistakes. So that is Clay Martin right there. And the other one is Robert Travis, who Bacon is talking about. Robert Travis is the president of Rooftop Life Rafts. So Robert Travis was the crab boater for 2 seasons on the Alaskan crab boat, and now he lives in Texas, and he has a Rooftop Life Raft, which they have rapid deploy life rafts for um, any areas, but especially urban areas, and they sell them around the world, right? If you have flooding, so you can get out. And he also has a concrete business and has won awards for like very intricate concrete finishes in buildings. But yeah, so I think all the interviews are great in the book. The Robert Travis interview was maybe the most emotional of the Velocity of Information. But you also find the interview with Clay Martin in there too, and yeah. So Corn Pop's Revenge is saying, we lent the sheriff's department 2 of our boats to help get people off the island. They have their own, but yeah, it's a thing, right, Corn Pop? So you're right on. Thank you for posting that. This is where Cajun, as you said, like civilian rescue forces, let's just say civilian rescue forces come in and they say, hey, like we have these things we can offer to you. And will you accept these, right? And so if you're local, right, your choice is yes or no. And if you say no, you're saying, oh, liability, if we approve them and somebody gets tangled with the power line and they electrocute it, then we're responsible. But again, I firmly believe, and this is where we get let down by our government at a federal and a state level, when these things happen, there should be a clear exemption for these 501(c) or 3C or whatever it is, but our nonprofit organizations like Cajun Navy Relief and people just under the Good Samaritan Clause, and also the law of necessity, which is a defined law, right, of protecting people who are trying to help out when local resources are overwhelmed, emergency resources. And we don't do a good job of that at all. Politically, we don't do a good job of that at all. So that is a big flaw in the way that FEMA operates. And again, I would point me ahead of FEMA, right? I would change that. And so we still have Cajun Navy Relief, Texas Navy coming in and doing these things are just like, we are going to provide the help regardless. And, but it is, to me, it's shameful the way that FEMA operates. We should have a national response. We should have 2 national response squads always ready to go. Again, they're rapid deployment for 15 days, and they come in with the latest 3D printer technologies. One of the things that people tend to need the most, right, in in areas that have been impacted, like the Bahamas, is they need catheters. For one, that you could 3D print. And you can say, well, we can fly these in, but you can't if you have damaged runways and if you have a pallet that goes on a plane, right? And it's the plane's too big to land on the runway. You have to break the pallet down to get it into smaller parts. Or if you have like an area where all the roads are damaged because of, like in Florida, so imagine you had a 3D printer and you could print some of these things on site, you could do that. But we don't spend money on time on that stuff. And we also don't legislatively protect that. We had this gap. We had this window, I should say, during the pandemic where you could print a mask, right? And you could print ventilator parts and donate them to your hospital stuff. And even though those were copyrighted, trademark, patent, all of that by other companies, that was okay during a certain window of 90 days or something. I wrote about it in the Velocity of Information. And we need more of that stuff going on. And we also just need government to get out of the way. State governments tried to make Cajun Navy Relief register, go through trainings, pay a certain fee. If you're going to be a part of Cajun Navy Relief, you got to pay your, $49.99 a year to have your registry with the state and a membership card. That's garbage. So that's where, again, I'm going to advocate as strongly as I can. And I know Cajun Navy Relief, Katie Pashon, and all that, but that's garbage, right? That is just that's not the way things work, and this continues to be a broken record when it comes to our national response to domestic um, environmental emergencies, right? Which could be the fire that went through Superior, Colorado, the tornado that went through, Paducah area, last year, Kansas, and then also Kentucky, and then the hurricane. Like, it's just garbage. It's absolute garbage, right? But yet we have billions coming over to Ukraine and all this stuff, and we don't have a rapid response domestic team. FEMA doesn't know what its role is, and the third is that FEMA and local governments get in the way of the domestic responders, like Cajun Navy Relief. Those are three big flaws right there. I would fix all of these. And that is one thing I am so glad I'm able to do when I teach aspiring superintendents and school leaders. We go through the law of necessity, and we also go through, like, know where the board is, and they've got your back. But it's like, be decisive in your decision making and be brave. Like, I'm not giving anybody advice to get out there and make decisions which are going to cost you your job, but you never know, right? But I'm saying, like, we have the case study of a student it was lost, which is authentic. We have that in Wisconsin here. A student got lost in a state park next to a Lake Michigan, actually. And then, but you have to trespass into certain areas to do this search. Do you do that? And some people are like, well, no, we're trespassing. Like, well, it's a law of necessity. You trespass because the bigger issue here is, finding the kid, right? But people get hung up on that, and their attorneys, like, are like, well, if you do this, if you approve this, and they're, they tear their ACL, they could sue you because you made the decision. I'm like, oh, whatever it is, right? I said, you can think so many scenarios down the road, but you all know, it's due, right? By the way, you have 19 thumbs up. Somebody needs to be the 20th. So. Dun 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 dun. Please subscribe and smash that like button. Be the 20th thumbs up. Andrew, you're thinking of writing a review tonight. All right. Let's go over here. Hey, it's John Rice. Dun 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 dun. John Rice. John Crump News. I've been on John Crump News a few times. I appreciate John Crump. He is a phenomenal investigative reporter. I got someone for you to talk to. If you're saying to me, pass it on, buddy. Safety Doc. Hey, it's John Crump News. So I appreciate you very much. Heavy Water. Hey, buddy. DeSantis this is Andrew, reactivated the Florida National Guard. National Guards are controlled by D.C., which isn't good for the states. Probably not. 23 states have their own state guards, which they should. They absolutely should. So let's go through here. Riggs Jr., no trespassing on my no square. Is that coming from Terrence Pop? So Ukraine money is for money laundering. John, it is baffling right now, right? It is baffling if we take a step away and we think, well, in the last week, right, or 10 days, we've had billions of dollars approved for Ukraine, and yet the devastation that has happened in Florida and the southern U.S., and also Hurricane Florian to Maine, nothing. And that's disgraceful. And people can say, well, people built in an area where they knew a hurricane could hit. Well, yeah, I get that, right? But in the moment, we need to help these people. They're Americans. We need to level up, right? See, so this whole thing, oh, we passed another $16 billion today for you. What are you doing for Florida? How about Maine? It's inexcusable. It is inexcusable. And again, if you can't help, then get out of the way and facilitate legislation saying, for the next 90 days, we're going to lift IP rights and on 3D printing, and we're going to do whatever. And I mean, it is shameful. It is completely shameful. Forensically, if you want to duke it out right over saying, hey, these places shouldn't have been built here, then duke it out over, 6 months from now. But right now, people need help, and get out there and you help them. And if you have to mobilize whatever you have to do it. I am so sick of this. I don't even know if it's partisan, right? I wouldn't even go that far because FEMA's always been wobbly. I don't know how that gets changed. If it's ahead of FEMA, or if it's more of a national posturing on this, or what it is, or power to the states, or whatever it is. But it is absolutely horrific, the under response that we have as a country when we have disasters that strike the country. Again, just going back to wildfires, Superior, Colorado last December. Tornado, Kentucky, Tennessee last December. Now, September, Hurricane Florian, Maine. October, Hurricane, Ian, Florida, and southern U.S. So it's horrendous. It's horrendous. Aside from National Guard, this is Corn Pop's Revenge. Local law enforcement and civilians have been doing most of the work here. Cajun Navy Relief has been in here. So yeah, Cajun Navy Relief is phenomenal. But you're right. Local law enforcement and civilians have been doing the work there. So by the way, we're still at 20 or 19 thumbs up. It's good. I mean, so people will pull together, right? But I think there's two things going on here. One is, it's not that there's outside agent. No one's just tuning this out saying, oh, whatever, it is Florida and whatever, I think the fact is that these outside civilian rescue forces aren't being embraced, and not only being embraced, they're probably being suppressed. So I think that's a big part of this. It was in Irma and Harvey, and I just think it's a big part of this. So, so I don't know, mutual aid, whatever it is, but why do we not have a national, either military or a CCC equivalent type, right, that is ready to go, and they perpetually train, and they can deploy anywhere and be there for 2 weeks, right, domestically, and they come in and very strategically, they have what they are to do, and they also are equipped with the most advanced 3D printers to come in and to print emergency supplies, and whether it be water filtration equipment, whatever it be. But the fact we don't have that, which could be there in, right, you could mobilize these people and have them there within a day. How the hell do we not have that? How do we not have that? I mean, we think about the Cold War, right? Always had Offutt Air Force Base, based in the different bases, the pilots ready to go at any moment and get into bombers and stuff like that and scramble. How do we not have a domestic emergency response at a federal level, or even, I guess you could do it at state level if the federal got out of the way. But I would say federal level, at least 2 areas in the U.S., if not, that you had 3 or 4, and maybe it's a cross of a civilian conservation corps / whatever. And they deploy, and they deploy again for 15 days, and then they come back. They're meant to come in and to do massive stabilization, and then, come in and get out. How do we not do that? I have friends in Kentucky and Tennessee who have told me that after the tornado that came through in December, they said, Dave, this is exactly what happened. We had a little bit of an appearance a little bit of an appearance um, of federal government coming in, right, and bringing in a bulldozer to clear off the roads because debris had been on the roads from the tornadoes, and then we had get this, they brought in dumpsters, and and periodically they would empty out and you'd have to bring your own stuff into the dumpster. They have no security at night, so like the whole area was just people coming in and picking whatever they wanted up from these areas that have been strewn all over with stuff from the tornadoes. And that was it. And then they left. And today, these areas are little changed from when the tornadoes came through. I have friends that live down there who send me pictures like within the last week or two. And they're like, yeah, here's they just we feel abandoned. And I'm like, I would feel abandoned too. I would be really, I'm getting some hot mic here, but again, we're going to fix that. Mic will be fixed, but I would be pissed. I would be pissed. I mean, it's one thing to pay taxes, right? Which seems like that would be, but it is, and politicians, right? They, national level, they'll come down and make an appearance and then they're gone. But damn it, like this is where we need to be better and help people. And it's organically, as you pointed out, Corn Pop, organically the people are there, help who are in the neighborhood, right? Engaged neighbor relief is coming in, but it absolutely is just mind-boggling to me. And it was even back during the pandemic, right, where the USS Comfort and Mercy were deployed, but to California. I don't know where the second one went, to Los Angeles or whatever, but and they were there for a month and then they left. It's like, what the hell? And why are these ships deployed then to outside of Fort Myers? Why isn't the USS Comfort or whatever one, right? Why aren't they deployed to be outside of Fort Myers? Or I don't get it. I absolutely don't get it. But yet again, we can and we will, right, as a country, as the politicians, they'll announce, oh, by the way, next week, like, there's another 19.4 billion and it's cumulative and it's recurring. So it adds on to the previous, month and whatever. It's going over to the, Ukraine and European nations. What the hell? So I'm really, I really get fired up about that. And one of the things, like when I go in my classes at kind of these organizations, and that are school districts pay thousands of dollars to be a part of these organizations, right? And then things happen like swatting, and so one of my aspiring superintendents said, what, or said, here's a document from our one of our state organizations, and it's to send out to parents to make them aware of swatting, and that's kind of happening. And so I looked at it and I was like, okay, like this is good, and I guess it's somewhat helpful, but you're paying thousands of dollars into this organization for something that any of your districts could come up with and just share. Like, don't clap too loudly and for too long that they put together something that any of your districts could have done. It makes it look like they're doing more than what they're doing. Like, what can they do to prevent it? I don't know. We'll get in. There's not much you can do to prevent this, but I said, this is a pretty minimum, right? Like, I could put together a letter like this in 15 minutes, like any of your districts could. You could just share this out. So there's this, you're kind of mistaking things. And then I just said, we're also at a point here in Wisconsin. We have $1.9 billion in school safety referendums or schools referendums coming up for buildings and for operating schools, stuff like that. 1.9 billion. I said, that same organization, what have they put out there for an ad about schools? And also the fact that if you build a school building, right, typically a school building is a really good investment because it lasts 30 to 50 years and the community gets a lot of use out of it. And so there's a lot of value. Where's that commercial coming from? None of these organizations are doing that for you, that you're paying all these thousands of dollars in. They're giving you basically a one-page PDF that they probably had their attorney on retainer write for them in a half hour. So like, but again, I think it comes back to this, like, what the hell does FEMA do? And domestically, and It's not like this. It's not like this hurricane, right? Either Hurricane Florian or Ian. It's not like this. It's not a tornado. It didn't just develop. You've got time. You anticipate this. This is going to happen, and yet like every damn handoff you get, you fumble. And not only that, then you're throwing a flag on everybody else who tries to pick up the fumble and advance the ball. I am really thin on this garbage. So Corn Pop saying, yeah, locals are definitely the largest force helping people. Locals with chainsaws, boats, airboats, heavy equipment like skidsters, construction equipment, etc. Many Floridians with a said type of equipment. Yeah. Which is awesome. And then the question is, what is the barrier to other people bringing in that type of equipment to support, or even just the people to come in and to interface and support? So Don Lemon is a joke. He's horrible. So he's not good. So what can you do if you get swatted, right? If you're a school district, or well, a few things. One is, so if you are somebody who has been repeatedly swatted, now if you're an entity, a YouTube influencer, right, like Corn Pop's Revenge or John Rice, you can register with your local police department, law enforcement, and sometimes these registries exist. So they'll, if the call comes in, they'll say, oh, this is a YouTuber or some type of influencer or whatever. So they've been swatted before, but it doesn't change things a lot. They'll let responding officers know. So I did the research on this, right? And then they'll at least have some idea coming into this, that this person this might not be authentic, but you still have to respond as if it is. But then, like I think Tim Pool has security now that interfaces with people, like as they come up to his place and stuff like that. Like they have some faster way to check his residence or whatever, to confirm that this stuff isn't going on. So there's this registry which can help, but you can't put a school on a registry. So like that wouldn't work. But the other part is state legislators proposing bills. We know that there's 450 school safety bills a year that are proposed, and about 20% of those get approved. But State Representative Kevin Miller from Ohio, he's the author of House Bill 462, which would make swatting a felony. He says right now there is nothing on the books that specifically addresses swatting under the bill. If someone is convicted, the person could face prison time as well as fines and restitution. In Colorado, so we talked about Ohio, but in Colorado, a 2018 law penalizes hoax 911 calls. If you make a swatting call, the penalties are similar to a third-degree assault, said State Senator Jeff Bridges, the sponsor of the 2018 measure. And the thing is, if someone is hurt in the process, that increases to a class 4 felony. If someone is killed, it increases to a felony in the third degree. Okay, like I get it. Like you can pass the legislation. Now, if somebody's a minor and they're doing this, it's not going to significantly impact probably what happens to them, because when they turn 18, it's going to be, they're expunged, right? They'll be treated as a minor if they're a minor. I understand where the legislators are trying to go with this. They're trying to legislate their way out of this. It's kind of like the Safer Schools thing, years ago, and the Gun-Free Schools Act and stuff like that. So you're putting signs in front of schools, this is a gun-free area, right? What that was really designed to do was to add additional legal ways to, if someone had an act of school violence that was gun-related, that you could you could tack more things on, right? But this really isn't going to change things. People doing this aren't afraid of the consequences. And even so, like by doing this legislation and stuff, it's coming back. What would really impact this is and this is tricky, right? Is to fund your cybersecurity team to be able to track these people, because a lot of times now they don't even find out who these people are. So your whole thing comes into cybersecurity and being able to track people. But if you publicly make that known, the people doing this will be like, fine, take me on, try it. Like, I'm going to do this and see if you can find me, right? So publicly, you're not going to say that, but behind the scenes, that's really what you need to do. And again, money going into cybersecurity, cyber defense here domestically, which we're not doing to the level that we could be doing when we siphon money off into foreign wars. But yeah, so where does this leave schools? It doesn't. Schools are completely vulnerable to this. There really is no defense to this as a school. You're waiting. I mean, you can inform parents, right, that this is a trend that's happening now, which I think you should, but it's not going to change the fact that this is happening. Some of this is trendy, right? Like, bomb threats were trendy for a while. Unfortunately, this will be trendy for a while, and then it might not be trendy, but there is very little a school can do to defend from this, right? So that's where, and again, these whole, the whole thing of legislation, House Bill 462, it makes swatting felony. People don't care. If you're doing this, and especially if you're a minor, it doesn't matter, right? If it's a felony or whatever, or restitution, you'd be like, I don't care. They don't care now. And, if you're an adult or if you're someone overseas or whatever doing this, whatever you do for legislation isn't going to make a lick of difference. And the fact is, we don't have the cyber, we're not cyber adept to identify most of these people anyway right now. So it's a really precarious situation for schools to be in. So you got to call out the elephant in the room, right? We don't know how to combat this. Again, I've always said school safety, we don't do enough in the threat reporting side, or if like you have any idea that someone might be planning to do a SWAT type thing, that you're letting people know. But again, if this is happening from people 1,000 miles away or in a different country, this is really a tough situation for districts to get out in front of it, let parents and police and get this communicated out. But then there's some hesitation on that. Well, if we do that, do we put ourselves out there and give people ideas, right? So it's a tough call. That's where your organizations really need to lead. That's where I think, in whether some TV ads or newspaper things, like your state organizations can get in here, right? Or your Department of Justice. And I don't have it all kind of worked out yet of what my approach would be, with this, to try to mitigate this and to work with schools. But this will definitely be part of the trilogy presentation 2025 when I'm on PBS. This will be it. This will be in it, because this is one of those things you really fear as a district, right? Because there's what can you do? And the other part is just cyber ransomware right now in school districts. Los Angeles got hit. Schools in my state got hit. And what happens? I don't even do it as a case study with superintendents. Get this. I don't do it as a case study with my superintendents because, so the question would be, you're notified that your student database has been compromised by a ransomware, attacker, and they have it, and they're saying we need $5 million in Bitcoin. We'll release, and we'll give it all. We'll unlock it, right? Most districts, like, what they do immediately is they call the police, and the police will say, call your insurance company. and most insurance companies and the Board of Education will have to make a decision, and they'll probably have 24 hours to do so. Do you pay the ransom and hope that whoever is doing this plays by their rules, right, of giving you the information back, even though they'll keep a copy of it, right? And letting you continue your systems? Or do you push it and suddenly they're releasing student records and faculty records? And if it's a student with a disability, right now, those are IDEA records, HIPAA, FERPA, all these violations. But I can tell you, the Board of Education, more than 90% of the time, will say we'll pay the ransom, because they know if these records get out there, they'll be sued because someone will say, you had a chance to prevent this, even though it's like, honesty among thieves, right? You're working with someone who stole records. And they'll just be like, we'll pay it. And so this is the question I have, and I need to clarify this with a few school insurance companies. I don't know if they'll give me this information or not, but so like if this happens, does the insurance company agree we'll pay up to like $2 million of a ransomware fee, and the rest is onto you, board? And then after that, it's like, or do schools like now pay an additional fee for coverage? I don't have this answer yet, and I'll get it, but it's pretty scary out there because, again, I don't use this with my superintendents because the board makes the decision, and almost all the time, they're going to say, we'll pay the ransomware because they don't want to deal with the fallout if this information gets released. So there's no real, I don't know. There's no input, and no one will lose their job. Like they won't go back to their tech person and say, well, our system wasn't secure enough or whatever. And it's not really a fault of a tech person necessarily in a school district, but it's just the way that it is. And so these districts and these communities and stuff are being picked off for millions of dollars on a weekly basis from ransomware, and their insurance companies, and their, and their board of education, their managing board will usually just say, pay it. So yeah, I thought about that. I had it ready to go with my superintendents as a case study. Like, how would you advise the board and all of that? And I was like, it's not really a soup's job. Like, this will be moving so fast. The board is going to get input from their legal counsel. And again, the board is just going to say yes. The board of education will say yes, because it's, in their mind, it's going to be easier to defend that position and hope that the ransomware, person or persons or organization or whatever complies, than to say that and not comply and suddenly have student staff records out on the internet. So it's pretty crazy. But then I go back to my aspiring soups and I said, what are your agencies telling you about this, and what guidance are they giving you? And nothing, right? They're getting nothing on this. And I said, well, this should be like not only a keynote, but a keynote in 3 breakouts at your next conference on ransomware, because it's happening across the nation and across the state. And it's not there, right? They, it's a case by case basis, Dave, and whatever. I'm like, well, it's garbage. Like, so how do you try to get in front of this? Like, what are some practices? Bring in, Chris Voss or, somebody from the FBI to present and, say, here are things that you can do to best protect your systems. Right. And, or bring in, tech experts to present, or send your tech people, or the state should have like a special tech team where your tech people will go and say, here's how to, keep a duplicate of what your operating system is. And I don't know, I'm not a tech person, right? But like, people do this, like, they know this. I have friends who are like high level corporate, tech security executives. But we don't see that again at the conferences, and we don't see that, and we don't see money coming out to school districts or communities for cybersecurity. What we see, right, is here's another 19 billion to a foreign country. So let's go over here to the chat. Heavy Water saying Rumble turned out to suck. Oh, it's not good. I'm not on Rumble. Don't know. Brand new YouTube turned out to suck. I don't know if I'm running a hot mic here. It kind of sounds hot in the headphones. But the headphones are kind of going to hell too, so I don't really know. I don't have a good gauge until I kind of get the new. I can tell you, like, the new Shure microphone is going to be awesome. Well, I think it is. Corn Pop is saying Odyssey, Telegram, and Cozy are my favorites. They don't censor, have live streaming capabilities, super chats, all that jazz. So cool. Telegram. I got to check some of these out. Super based content on there. Good. Do not pay the ransom. John Rice. So, yeah, I mean, again, most will pay the ransom. So most, whether it's school. Well, it's a school district, right? I guess we'll keep it in my wheelhouse. They'll pay the ransom. Because it comes down to the Board of Education and consult with their legal team and also their insurance carrier, and they will pay the ransom. Superintendent really has minimal say in that. So, Corn Pop, I do still obviously watch some people on YouTube, but I can't stand the grifting so many people seem to do on YouTube. Always trying to sell you something instead of being real. Yeah. I'm not trying to sell you anything except School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, the most honest book ever written about the $3 billion school safety industry. I'll tell you it's worth it. The audiobook 1099, narrated by me. And also trying to sell you the philosophy of information. This book is a little more. The publisher prices it, not me. The audiobook will be out in April. Narrated by Ben Hawk. That is excellent. It's well worth your money. So here we have Bolo. Bolo saying, doesn't large money transfer trigger red flags? Isn't the ransom target account linked to a person? I don't know. Whoa, we just lost our doc cam. Bring over doc cam here and put it on the charger. I don't know, man. Jeez. Just a second here. Hell is going on here? All right, don't go anywhere. I gotta plug this thing in here. So do not go anywhere.
How were the beans and chili that you had for breakfast?
They were delicious. Thank you for asking. But now I am very gassy.
I'm sorry to hear that. Who let the frogs out? Pew, that stinks very bad. I have to open the window. Oh no. My cap flew off and it was sucked into the engine.
Holy smokes, the engine just cut out. We should use the Decide model to help us make the right decision.
Mayday. Mayday. I am declaring a beans and chili emergency. Please advise for landing.
Flight 019er, 2 miles northeast. Turn left at 90. Maintain 4,800 to establish an approach. Engine 5, dispatch. Pockets of fire all around.
Whoa, that wasn't good. So I had a lot of fun putting that together, by the way. I'm looking forward to the new mic. Although it's going to hang down. I got to kind of figure that out a little bit, how this will work. But going with a Shure MV7 mic. So I'll have a whole control panel. That's where I have the 3 monitors. I'm still contemplating putting the 4th monitor up. In the 4th monitor, I'd be able to show the control panel for this, and headphones and all that other stuff, and grab audio overlays. So stuff like this, dun, da, da, right? Like thumbs up, stuff like this. I could have up on a different panel, which I think would be pretty cool. So I've got the ports on it on the PC here. I just haven't bought the stand and the monitor. Like I can get a nice monitor from the guy downtown, the computer guy, like a used one to just put up there. So I don't know. I'm thinking about it. So let's go back to the chat. So summary on swatting. Swatting is when you call in a false 911 call, and it's usually regarding intruder or some event where someone is going to be hurt, and then police respond and it's false, right? So they put all these resources together, and in a school it's very traumatic for staff to go through, and students. In Minnesota on September 21st, it happened 15 times. In most cases now, they don't ever find these people. What can you do to defend against it? Not a lot. You can be on a registry if you're a person like a YouTuber or a celebrity or something like that. And then if you're frequently swatted, the dispatcher might have that come up, and there might be some interface then with your security force. Right? How many of us have security, right? But if you're like a school, right, that's not going to, you could be swatted 10 times in a month, and it's not going to put you on a registry or anything like that. You'll have the same response the 11th time. It's really fatiguing to these safety systems and to people to do this. What's the best way to respond to this? Like, legislators jump in and say, well, we'll make the consequences more severe. Well, the reality is the consequences aren't, people aren't considering that at all, right? It's not working. And by focusing your efforts there, it's a waste of time. You would be better off to beef up your cyber security on this, right? To try to identify the people who are actually doing this. And also your threat reporting systems. If it's probable that people say they're going to do these things before they do them, but it's a mess. This is one of those loopholes in the system, right? It's kind of like if we go back to, what was it, the Dark Knight, when they would call in all the police, the threats and stuff, and divert the police to one side of the city while they were committing a bank robbery on the other side. But this is really hard to combat and respond to. So we went over it in class. So yeah, let's see here. Bacon is saying to Solitude, this surprises no one that's known you for more than 5 minutes. Solitude is saying that clip was funny as hell. So I don't do a lot of clips like that, but I wanted to do that before the show with Graham. So this is why we can't have nice things. Bolo's right on with that. He's spot on with that. We, for schools, right, and just for right now, these swatting events are happening during the school hours. But what if it's during a football game when 2,000 or 3,000 people are in the stands, or a basketball game? These are going to significantly change how schools operate. And so, if you had the same threat that came into an NFL stadium, for example, that had 75,000 people in it, they wouldn't evacuate the stadium typically. I had ISS 24/7 on the safety doc, like third episode or something like that. But, there would be measures where they would check on this, but it wouldn't be, logically wouldn't be practical to try to evacuate people from a structure like that. But how do we go forward with this happening, right? I don't know the answer to that. And again, when my superintendents, my aspiring superintendents or new superintendents said, well, one of our state organizations came out with this letter. I'm like, that's good, right? But that's a first step. That's something. But also, what are they doing to advocate with your police forces or with your state's cybersecurity, or all these levels to try to find out who this person is. I'm like, you're being provided. There should be, if there was a clearinghouse in your state, right, and one district put together a letter and had that letter out there in this clearinghouse, of saying, that we have the swatting has been happening around the country. And, if this happens in our school, there'll be a typical response as if it was authentic, because we wouldn't know. Right. Like that's part of a clearinghouse, and that document should be a clearinghouse document. I don't know if it's out there as a clearinghouse document or just to the members. If it's not a clearinghouse document, it should be. It's like when certain things are put behind a paywall and you're like, but that should be public, right? That should be available to everyone. I don't know the answer to that. I'll check into it. But I'm kind of like, I don't know. And I have to remind people, like, you're honestly, like, for your organization to do this is good, but this is not cracking the atom right here, that what they're doing, right? Like, I could have done this in 15 minutes and got this letter out to you. Like, they have so much, contracted with their attorneys and to put the letter together and their stuff. I mean, so, right. This is good, but it's also fairly ubiquitous, right? And obvious. Where's the next level of this that you're seeing from your professional organizations? Such as, what is trauma-informed care for your district if they go through this? What is the interface between your professional organization and any digital cyber identification, processes going on the state or federal level to try to find people who are doing this, right? What does that look like? So those are really the questions you have to ask, because again, I think activity can be, how should I say, like, somebody puts something like this out there as an organization, again, which is a good thing, but it gets a big round of applause, and it doesn't deserve a big round of applause. Like, it's what you should do as an organization, right? You're getting paid thousands of dollars from each of these districts in aggregate. The amount of money coming in is just unbelievable. And the fact is, any of these districts could most likely have put together a very similar document. And this is where we talk about there should be a clearinghouse for not only school safety, but kind of school best practices, documents and stuff. REMSED.gov has that for school safety stuff, their toolbox. We don't have that in the state of Wisconsin. I don't know if many states have that. Federal government really doesn't have that outside of REMS. But REMS would, if you ask REMS to come up with a letter like this, they would have it out there in 24 hours. So I don't know. I get a little prickly when there's a lot of applause for just doing your job, right? So John Rice is saying, what does all this say about the police's character and general demeanor? I'd have to go back on this one. I don't know. John Rice, the perception which is correct that police are dumb and dangerous to society. So, John, and I really believe that there are very sophisticated cybersecurity networks and things like that go on that just don't meet the public eye. But sometimes those need to be made very overt, and we don't do that, right? Like, we don't know the extent of the resource, the assets that are out there to protect us and working. I guess that's subjective, right? I'm not gonna go too far down that road because I don't know. But it's like if someone came forward and say, yeah, but look at this organization. We prevented 25 things from happening last month. Well, okay, then we should know about some of those. Well, if you knew about them, then people would be upset or something. Well, I don't know. It's kind of a different mentality. But Heavy Water is saying the people are going to be like neighborhood care and spy network of some sort. They collect evidence. Yeah, Heavy Water, you're right on. That happened a lot during COVID, right? And let me go and just show this 45-second video I put up in March, and then we'll come back to it. So if I can find it, so right here, 45 seconds, I'll come back. So you talked about this thing of having neighbors report on neighbors and stuff like that. So let's watch this, then we'll come back. Hi, everybody. This is the Safety Doc with a face validity check-in here on March 31st, 2020. Bellevue, Washington has started a tool to report stay-home violations. This is from the government website in Bellevue, Washington. So we're going to scroll down here to My Bellevue portal and then to report gatherings. They've made it convenient. There's a map on the right. You can drag a location over here into address, write a description, and then also include photos. This is a practice we've seen in some areas of the country, but it's going to be more prevalent. Look for it in your area, probably in the next week or two. So Bellevue, Washington, that happened in Dane County next to me. It happened across the country. Within about 2 weeks, a lot of these got taken down for a couple of reasons. One, was a horrible way to allocate your resources during a pandemic, right? You have people staying at home and you're splitting up your forces, right? Because you don't want people to have close contact. And here you're trying to do that. It was just crazy. So, and the second was you had people coming in from outside of the area into Bellevue, Washington, and they're like, okay, we'll watch for this. So suddenly you have outsiders coming in and trying to report people. And it was, but part of that too, that was really strange is that was up really fast. So, who made the decision to contact their tech people, and their tech people had to put this together, and you had to integrate a Google map and you could input pictures. I mean, there's a lot of work that went into that, and it was ready to go within like a week. So very bizarre. But I think that you're right on with saying, this situation, I think it could happen in Florida, right? Like people come down to rescue, they're part of Cajun Navy relief or things, and suddenly like people are videotaping what people are doing and whatever, and do they believe they should be there or whatever? I don't know. But I think what you're saying is definitely happening. This is Bolo. Perfect Overwatch means bye privacy. Yeah, no, you're right. It's as I wrote in Velocity of Information, where I think it was the Detroit police, tracked down some people just by pinging their cell phones. So, their location, and yeah, Andrew's right. Bellevue, Washington. Yep. I am so glad I made that video, and I have a more extensive video of the website and clips and stuff like that. But because people don't believe that happened, that's one of the things with Velocity of Information, right? People don't believe we're essential or non-essential in one day, usually kind of March 20th of 2020. But people do not believe this stuff happened. And if you go in and try to search it now on Google, you'll never find it. It's all scrubbed. So I'm glad that I captured some of this, especially at Bellevue, Washington, because that was really representative of other places. Like if you look at that video, like that's very similar to Dane County and other places like or Madison, Wisconsin, state capital of Wisconsin. And but again, people don't realize that it's in my book, and it's also that that video is linked out in the reference section in my book. So Andrew saying the Solitude Surfer, I gotta listen to it first. So listen to it, buddy. 6 hours that you will love. I loved narrating that book. Again, I was terrified to narrate, which is kind of weird, right? Because I've presented on PBS and I love presenting in class, but book narration. But my sound engineer did a great job. I had a lot of fun with the book. A lot of energy in the book. You can kind of see the passion, of the doc coming out in the chapters of that book. It's a great listen. School of Airs. So, Andrew's saying they're already denying the lockdowns were bad and are deleting proof of it. That's the thing, right? So Andrew, you're right. Like the Velocity of Information with 471 endnotes. You can't deny that Carl Mankey from Ossawa, Michigan, the barber, had his place shut down, right? And he was deemed non-essential. And you can't deny that the word preference changed overnight in the dictionary during the Coney Barrett Supreme Court hearings. Like that is in the book, with complete, end notes. And again, it's it's amazing to me. And kind of, I don't know if it's surprising. It's not surprising anymore, but it still has a shock value to it. I will talk to people about the book, or I'll present on the book, and and people will say, I didn't remember. I forgot that I was deemed essential or non-essential. Or I forgot that they had a website where we could report social gatherings of people of 5 or more, whatever. And we could put photos in, and I forgot this, and I forgot this. I'm like, it's all here, right? Like it's in the book, 471 endnotes, and this book, I think, is becoming even more of a historical asset. It's a practical book. It's entertaining. Like, again, you will love reading this. It's extremely well done. And so many graphics in here, custom graphics that I had made by Amy K. DiStefano, which are just phenomenal, right? That kind of go, this one goes across 4 pages through the year 2020 to go into terminology like crowd and behavior and finite voltage. This is so well done. I did all of these. Like I designed those, and then Amy created all of those. She's a graphics specialist. So, but yeah, so you'll be like, oh, like here's some terminology, and people they'll look at that timeline and say, oh, I didn't remember there was a coin shortage, and which I saw there was again today. Like I went to a store, but like there's a picture in here where we had a gas station that was buying your coins from you. So I think they give you I don't know if it was like $1.25 for 6. There was some trade-off. Here was a picture too. Like, remember the places that had to rush and put the mask, signs up and stuff like that. So, probably forgot about this. That is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right there. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Charles Mack. This is a map that you could get on your phone. That's a screenshot from Chuck's phone. And it was high COVID area. So you can see the area is a little darker. That was a higher COVID area. You could go into that app, which was from the local newspaper, and you could basically get down block by block to see where COVID was. You could pretty much get down house by house. So, like, what were you supposed to do with that data, right? So were you supposed to avoid those areas, roll up your windows? We can't deliver pizza because this is a high COVID block. If you're a realtor, you can't show this house, or 2 years from now, you have to say, well, this is a house, but like 2 years ago, somebody had COVID who lived in this house. Like, it was really weird. But again, it was, somebody felt that was important to put that information out there. So you could literally go block by block, and you could go down minutely house to house and figure out who had COVID. Publicly available, right? As it was happening. What in the hell? Oh my God. And again, because, Chuck has a screen capture, I was able to put it in the book, and I was able to write about it in the book. And people, again, don't believe that happened. Oh, that didn't happen anywhere, right? Well, here, let's look at this. And I've got the original, whatever timestamp things from Chuck. But they don't deny it. When they see it in the book, they don't deny it. It's kind of like it brings them back to, oh yeah, that did happen. One thing I didn't put in there is Chuck had essential papers to drive. Like he took pictures of those and sent them to me. Like he didn't just scan them right and whatever forward. He took pictures and sent them to me. And I was going to include those in the book, and I decided not to, because I thought it could open up some liability to Chuck if I did that. Like his employer could say, like, well, this wasn't meant to be published or whatever. So I didn't. But that was another thing too, like, right, people getting essential papers. Like, I remember I had to do some banking, and it was like, I don't know, April of 2020, and my bank is 55 miles away that I do most of my banking with. So I contacted the bank and said, I'm coming up to do some banking. And also I was like really leery of kind of the whole financial system at that time. Like, I wanted some flexibility. So that was one of the reasons I was having to come up in person, do some things. And I said, can you send me some type of document indicating I have this appointment with you and what we're doing? Because if I'm pulled over, like I have to go on an interstate, I want to be able to show this document. And they said yes. So they sent me basically like a letter saying, you have an appointment at this time to come up and, whatever with your finance. So, and I thought, because who knows what's going on back then, your essential papers, that if I'm pulled over for, driving as a non-essential task, I can bring out this print, this thing and say, here I'm coming up to do, banking, and here's an email from my banker. So I have this appointment and I can, prove that this is a essential activity, I guess. It's really weird, but the bank helped. I wasn't pulled over, but it was strange. Chuck got pulled over a few times. Chuck Mack, and he had to show his essential papers for why he was being out. That was crazy though. People again, the thing that surprises me the most with velocity of information, which is an awesome, it's now in I think Tokyo, Japan. So I track everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but I can find out where the book is, usually through my publisher, like through an interface, like for public libraries and universities, stuff like that. And it's increasing every day, like new places. But this is an interesting. It's like in the United Arab Emirates, it's in China, it's in Germany. And people contact me about this book. Again, I present on this book, and I never expected my talking points to first include getting through people who said, "Oh, like I forgot about that, right? I didn't remember being essential or non-essential. I didn't remember the papers thing. I didn't remember, that just countless things throughout this book. I didn't remember that, we didn't do fitness for the first month. Like that would have made sense. Like, why weren't we doing fitness? We had celebrities on how to sanitize your phone. And so I kind of get through that, like saying, we all went through this. Like it was 2 years ago, right? Like we all went through this together, and I documented it, but I don't think if I would have documented it, I don't think I would have remembered it as well as I do. Right. But that seems to be the narrative with the book. Is it really is this Tommy Lee Jones type of thing, like in Men in Black, right? Of people had their memories flash, gone. I can't. I don't have my feature here anymore. Huh. Well, that's gone. I have my little ability to make my graphics on the screen, but people, I was surprised. I'm still surprised, but it's crazy. People don't remember really what happened in 2020. They don't remember being deemed essential or non-essential. So I've had to just change my narrative and my dialogue, and I don't know. It's all good, I guess, as far as me as an author and stuff like that. It's just I thought I would be spending more time on, when you're like right now, I still believe people are in crowd and behavior and how to work with people who have hit finite voltage. And there's a high suicide rate in people, right, who hit finite voltage, and how to help mitigate that. And that's not where people are at. People are just trying, when they get the book, it's this weird thing of it helps. I don't know if it helps them or it forces them to remember things that they blocked out. That's where I think the book will be really powerful down the road. It's good now, but I think it will be great 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. CT Designs is saying, getting pulled over and asked for your papers to be able to explain your reason for traveling is insane. Yeah. And I can tell you, CNT, Chuck Mack, who is our friend, our head of IT at University of Pittsburgh Med here, who is included in a chapter. And that happened numerous times to Chuck. So he would text me and say, I got pulled over today. I had to show my papers. And I had copies of his papers, like when he got issued them in Pittsburgh. At least 5 times, if not more. And That's crazy. People forget that happens. People forget the papers are out there. And I didn't include it in the book because, again, it was issued by his employer. And part of your role as an author in a published work, right, is you have to be careful when you interview people and you're writing about them, because I don't want to set them up to be, undermined or in a controversial position, right? So, Chuck was fine with me having that information, but in the moment, I didn't post that on social media or something like that, but to put it in the book, or even to redact some things and put it in the book, and his employer, could come back and say, well, that wasn't meant to be shared, publicly or something like that. So that's where that stuff never made it into the book, because, part of the responsibility, I think, as an author, especially in a nonfiction scholarly work, is to be truthful, which I completely was, but to also not set the people you interview up for tripwires down the road. And I told people that many times when everybody that I interviewed, and some of the things I wasn't changing what you were telling me. I would never do that. And they all read the stuff before it got published. But I said, there will be some things I will not put in there, because it has the potential to impact you negatively, even as far as like separation from employment. So yes, it would add a dimension to the book. It would make it a little more fascinating, stuff like that. But I have to leave some of this out, because I'm not going to try to sell more books or try to do, get even better ratings and throw you under the bus. It's just an ethical thing. Koopa's saying, I never stopped going anywhere during this entire time. Yeah, no, I didn't really stop going anywhere probably either, but I did have a weird, I don't know. It was, like I said, that banking thing was weird, because that was maybe like the first week in April. And again, I have to drive on an interstate, and I'm thinking, and nobody knew, like, you didn't know if you got pulled over, if the police would identify what you're doing as essential or non-essential. And if it was non-essential, what were the consequences? Like, nobody knew that. It was crazy, right? So I felt I at least had a reason to go up and to meet with the police, but it was weird, again, we kind of forget that, but there were a lot of people who were very afraid to drive, to be out. Koopa's saying, hey, I've been listening and working. Just got done with one paper I had to write. The Safety Doc. The book will be great in a few years if people go back and read it. They might learn a few things about freedom. Yeah, it's so School of Airs had a revival after the Uvalde school shooting. Just frankly, it did. I mean, the book's uptick in sales. And I think this is something, that continues to be more relevant and more, my 2019 PPS presentation seems to be catching more steam and airing across the country. You're right. This book will be something that in the moment maybe isn't, I shouldn't say it's not appreciated, because I don't think that's true, but it's people aren't aware, and pretty soon people will identify it. There are some people already who do that. I find it on, websites, or people contact me or whatever. And there's nothing out there like it, right? There's just nothing out there like it. And I think over the years, it will continue to gain a kind of almost like a cult following. I would expect the Velocity of Information to be kind of a cult following book, much like Marshall McLuhan's The Message is the Medium, and John Ronson's So You've Been Shamed, and things like that once it's out there for a little while, it's going to kind of have this group of people who will adhere to it, and then they'll build out their network of saying, you gotta read this book. And so it's really cool. It's kind of cool. Well, I should say it is very cool in my class both classes, but like the class I taught Saturday, to be in front of class and say like, well, I authored like 2 books, right? And they're both through publishers, and here's like School of Errors and stuff we talk about, but here's a velocity of information. Because like people just don't know people who write books. It's pretty rare. And you can self-publish a book, yes, but like to go through a publishing house and international distribution and 400 plus citations and just it's pretty rare. Like I never knew anybody that did that, and I'm not using that as a tip my hat type of thing, but as I think it's an important role in what I do. And I share this with people, and I said there's an important role in this class for primacy. And what that means is like I've done everything I'm telling you to do. I've met with my legislators. I've testified before legislative bodies on numerous things, like, right? I have written journal articles, which have been the feature article that they've built the entire journal around. And one of those is coming out in October in Phi Delta Kappa. Like I have done that. I have written letters to the editor. I have published books. I've been on PBS. And I'm like, these are all things that you could do to some extent, right? And people just don't see that. No one has ever, they're like, they don't know anybody who's done that. That's one. And the second is no one has ever kind of told them, like, you could write an article for a journal. You could do this. So I've changed my classes because no one tells them that they could do this, and their organizations don't encourage them to do this. And, so I'm like, you know what? I had a little video I showed in class. It's on the internet, right? It's Channel 3 or whatever interviewed me back like 12, 15 years ago. And I'm like, I sold the upper quadrant of our webpage, 1/16 of our webpage as a district. We sold that for ad space to local businesses. We made enough money to buy a lift van for students with disabilities with that decision. My board was fully behind me, which I appreciate. My superintendent was awesome, but I'm like, that was creative. Like, who does that? Like, you could do that. You could do that. And so, like you show people this, they're like, holy smokes. Like, I had no idea, and I talk about esports, and I'm like, I'm not telling you this as someone who just is kind of interested in this. I talked to the head of esports in Wisconsin twice. I interviewed him. I gave him the document. I shared it with you so you could proof it and tell me if anything's wrong. But there's a student in Wisconsin who participates in esports who uses a controller that he operates with his mouth because he's paraplegic. So he has a controller, basically a stick that he operates. He's one of the highest ranked players in esports in the sport that he participates in. And I'm like, that kicks ass. That is great. And have you ever heard about this? Nope, never heard about Dave. I'm like, how many of you have esports? None of them had esports. I'm like, you go ahead and do this. Here's a person to contact. Here's how to set up esports. It crosses Title IX. It doesn't matter what gender you are playing esports. Doesn't matter what race you are. Doesn't matter economic accessibility. It doesn't matter disability. You can go to Thingiverse. We went to thingiverse.com, right? Thingiverse, where you can go for 3D printing. I'm like, look at all these adaptive controllers, right? Microsoft already has a ton, and they don't care if you adapt a controller, like as long as you're not selling them, like 10 of them. I'm like, look at this stuff. They're like, oh my God, I don't know that. I didn't know that existed. I'm like, it does. It does. Like, so this benefits like all of your students, right? And I'm like, and then I always pause and say, why have you not heard about this from any of your state organizations? Why hasn't there been a breakout session where they've had Mike Dahl, the head of Wisconsin Esports, at one of your conferences, or a keynote, right? About options for students to participate, including Title IX, including Individuals with Disability Education Act, students with disabilities. I'm like, where the hell is this? You never heard about this, right? Nope, never heard about it, Dave. And then, they're all like, well, it seems like in 5 years, like all this. I'm like, yeah, it'll be here. And it can be here right now for your schools. And it's not their fault. It's their fault that their organizations are not telling them this. It's their fault that at their state conferences that they go to, Wisconsin Esports isn't there, right? And that the Wisconsin Esports hasn't invited to be there. It's not Wisconsin Esports issue. Like, Mike Dahl is an incredible person. That organization is phenomenal. But I'm like, so I'm telling you, right? And but part of this is wrong. Like you should at your core innately feel that it's wrong that I'm the first person telling you about Wisconsin esports, which has been in existence and increased again your participation for youth in Title IX and students with disabilities, and it's a really great thing. And but you never hear about it, and then I go through all these things like why am I the first time you've heard about this? And then try to answer that question for yourself, right? why is it that when Wisconsin had a bill 44 to make it so school classroom doors could be modified for different safety devices, such as like a keypad that you should have to enter a code in and then additionally move the handle to get out of the door. Why is it that your state organizations never let you know about that so you could come down and testify? And I did. And I've got the recording of the testimony. And then, so I'm like, you've got to know, right, that, and I'm your truth agent in this. I'm telling you, there's so much more in this role for you than what you think there is. And I said, I think that's a good thing, right? That to make you aware of these things and stuff like that. And, so they're like, why is this information being curated to us? Why don't we see there's our conference? I'm like, well, you can ask that of your conference people. Like, I'm not your conference people, but that's a good question, right? Why isn't REMS there, emergency management? Well, because probably, you're not making any money off REMS. They don't sell to districts, right? Esports, you're not making really any money off of that. It's great, but Wisconsin esports, they might pay an advisor $400 to be in charge of that. I'm like, look at your vendor tables outside your conference. Who's paying to be there? So I said, it's just one of those things. Like, I really want you to be better than what you are. And I say, these are great people. I want them to be aware that there's this whole, when they're in these positions, there is this whole new constellation of opportunities for them that nobody tells them. Nobody tells them they can testify before legislative bodies. Nobody tells them they can bring in the esports stuff. Nobody tells them they can call FEMA and get free on-site training, which they can also parlay into a board presentation and complying with their school safety stuff, which is due January 1st, which is a ridiculous day to have it due, by the way. But nobody tells them this stuff and I think they don't tell them because there isn't any money to be made off of it at the conference level. So just to be frank, how do you overlook this stuff? It's unconscionable. So I'm always glad. One of the students came up to me after class and said, he said, Dr. Proden, I would have never known about this stuff had you not presented it. It's not at our state conferences. I don't see it coming out in memos. I don't hear my peers talking about it. I'm like, well, first of all, good. I'm glad you're getting this, and you're, but right. Like, this is a problem. This is a big problem. And like I said, I don't care if I'm not a part of a school district, right? I'm not part of these state organizations, so I don't really care if they're offended by my advocacy in this area, in these areas. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing. But yeah, like I said, it's a weird thing. They don't have really any defense to it. And also, like, I saw one of my students shared a video from one of the state organizations regarding some inclusive practices, which it was very offensive. It was from, I think, 2016. And he said, he watched, and he said, this is very offensive. This is, very stereotyped and inaccurate. But it was still out on his organization. So I said, we have two options here. One, you can contact them and tell them, as a member, you felt this was offensive. Or if you don't want to do that, I will contact them and tell them, I believe, I feel this is offensive and this is outdated. And then, give them an opportunity to remove it from their website and to, do whatever they want to try to replace it with, information that's more accurate. But But I said, this is part of it, right? You've got to call people out sometimes. You've got to call out the elephant in the room. And not I think we're so far away from that as a society, especially in school safety. We just don't call people out. You don't have to call people out with the act of demeaning them. You can just call people out and say, I think what you're representing here, on like your website in this video, hasn't aged well, right? I don't think it's reading the room very well. So I'm aware of this. Some other people are aware of it. Maybe, don't just calling your attention to, maybe take a look at it and see if this still aligns with what you want to portray, and just leave it at that. Right. But people won't do that. I don't know. Like for me, I don't know if I've never been, but I'm not in that hyper offended mode. And again, like my feedback from my PBS presentations has been outstanding. But if someone like pointed something out and said like, I don't agree with this and here's why, well, okay, then thanks. Maybe I can improve that. Maybe there was something there that's way off, or maybe like, no, I'm still good with what it is. But I think it's amazing in my classes though, and now I can see it because we're halfway through the class. People are starting to think the way that I think, right? Of question these organizations and question what is happening out there and stand up on some of these things. And we had a great class on Saturday where we, did some of that and said, well, here's like a piece of legislation that I think is absolutely ridiculous, right? And do you feel the same way or not? Or what if, parents and students came to you, and how would you make your argument for district to support this legislation? And I love when people think that way. So it's Pokes a Bob. Dun, 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 dun. Direct violation of your Fourth Amendment. Yeah, that asking you where you're going to go and stuff is crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. Pokes Bob. I remember that first 3 months when nobody was on the road. It was a free for all. Those speed limits, no cops. You got around like nobody's business. Yes. Yeah, that was weird, right? Like the lack of traffic, and it's a strange time. People, again, don't remember that that's the way things were. It's Bending Ballistics. What up, everybody? Hey, Bending Ballistics. We are almost at 1,230 subscribers. I think we're at 128 or 129 today. So you could be the person, if you're not subscribed, to put us over that. And again, we're just within a couple hundred hours of watch hour for being monetized. So I think it will happen. Yeah. So Coop's saying, listening to a good show, doing SDI classwork and drinking a few beers. SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative. Coop worked on that with Reagan back in the 80s. So it's a good model. Benny, name a time and I'll set it up. Do it live if you want. I'm trying to wrap my head around the concept. Maybe we can have a few. So yeah, the doc also is willing and happy to be a guest on shows. Just let me know. So that would be good. I will return to the Michael Deacon podcast, which is a large podcast. I haven't got back to Michael on some time. This week's kind of crazy, like the whole concrete project. It's thrown me off a little bit. I don't want to overly commit. Plus, I have some firewood coming in and another class I'm teaching and stuff like that. So I just feel like when I go on like Michael Deacon program, I've got to have my stuff together. So, but yeah. So I don't know if you're seeing this in your community. Like, by the way, I've got to reset I have a new camera coming in, so I have better white balance and stuff like that. For some reason, like the camera's showing just not great stuff. Do you play guitar? I don't. The guitar in back of me is my godfather's guitar. He passed away in 2013 of cancer, and had given me the guitar. So it is more of a display and memory piece that I have back there. So yeah, it's a cool thing. So I do remember as a kid, like he could come up with songs spontaneously for anything, and they were hilarious. So that was really, really a lot of fun. Um, so let me know if you're seeing the swatting happening in your area, if it's happening in schools, if it's happening with hospitals or other businesses or whatever, or if you know anybody who's been swatted. Um, and then also, like what you think would be the response to this to try to stop this stuff or try to slow it down, because there really isn't there's nothing to impede this right now outside of this whole thing. Well, let's do legislation. It can be a felony. Well, I can tell you, if someone is willing to do this, right? I mean, realistically, they're not very. That's not going to be something they're going to go through their box, their heuristics of saying, well, it's a felony. Well, so this thing of trying to legislate your way out of this isn't going to work. That's a fallacy. It's probably a mistake. But so what do you do instead? And so let me know your ideas on that. Like, post them in the comments. Like, what do you do? What do you do instead? How do you try to slow this down or just stop it? And, we could say there's nothing that could be done, but I don't believe that. I think there are things that could be done, right? I think especially on the cybersecurity side, but again, the response to this is very typical in school safety. We'll pass a bill. So, anything that happens that's school safety related, we'll pass a bill and we'll try to legislate our way out of it, or at least we, as a legislator, we can say we did something. So I look at this and I'm like, this is so misplaced. This is so, it's, again, we have State Representative Kevin Miller, Ohio, is an author of House Bill 462 that makes swatting a felony, which is good. But is it going to change the frequency of swatting? Probably not. Because people who are doing this aren't going to, you could say if you do swatting, you're going to be in jail for 20 years. It's not going to change this at all. So the legislative path to this and the law side of this and consequences and stuff, that's just not going to be effective. So then what might be effective, right? I don't know. I'll think about it. I'll keep working with people, but this type of stuff doesn't work. So, this is Corn Pop. I wish it could have just stayed that way. It was like living in Fort Myers in the 1950s. So let's go over here. Safety Doc. Had a kid around here calling a couple of bomb threats a week or two ago. But yikes. So, but sounds like they found him, right? And identified who it was. So one of the things too, like Coop, I tell my administrators, this was always my approach as a school leader, right? I said, we need to have an assembly, at the start of the year. And there's a few things we need to cover. And one of these would be like, if, you call in a threat to the school, we will relentlessly with police try to, we'll find you, right? And there will be the consequences that will follow you and your family through life, right? You got to be really overt with that. So boom, like that was one thing to put out there. The second thing is we would bring in like the district attorney and the police. The district attorney who's going to charge you with the crime and say, if you're sending nude pictures of yourself or others, like underage, right, through the internet to others who are underage, like here's where this will go, right? You'll be charged. Here's what it looks like to be on a registry where you have to knock on all your neighbors' doors and say, knock, knock, knock. Here I am. Like, I have to let you know I'm on a, sexual registry offender list and stuff like this. Like, do not sugarcoat any of this. Like, put it out there. I had more instances as an administrator where parents came to me and said, my kid, like they never knew like this could happen, this could blow up like this. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it is what it is. There's consequences. And if they would have only known, well, but I changed my approach, and I tell my aspiring school leaders, be very overt in these areas. And again, people say, oh, like we shouldn't be talking about those things during an in-service with students, or, we're going to give them ideas. That's garbage. Like, you lay it out, and again, document it and put out there, and you say, hey, if you, if you do this, and here's the whole registry thing and stuff like that. And in addition to other things, and the fact of what this impact, usually what kind of hits kids is, here's what it could look like for your family. And you give cases like, here's a kid who did this, like, so you've been shamed, and and here's what it was like for their family, and have their and then kids are like, oh shit, like I don't want to deal with that. Or if you're trying to apply for a job later on, or trying to go to a college, or whatever you're trying to do, right? So I found that to be effective. Let's go back here to chat. So it's agorizer. Dun, dun, dun. Go back. We cannot legislate our way out of everything, for God's sake. You're right, C&T. You're right, Coop. Absolutely right. School safety, people try to go there, 400 bills a year, 20% approved. So it's late. I'm still straight. Agorizer. John Ray says a lot about cops of calling them as a way to enact violence. Yeah, the whole swatting thing is a weird take on society, right? And so it's one thing to SWAT a school, an institution. It's another thing to SWAT an individual. So, as we had the video, the Call of Duty, where it was, if I can find it here, the guy who was killed because he came out on his front porch and he didn't keep his hands up. So Shane Gaskill, let me put that down in the chat if you want to. Shane Gaskill, the year was 2017. So playing Call of Duty, pissed somebody off, right? And they called the police and saying, this guy's got a weapon, he's dangerous, stuff like that. Police show up, he goes out on the porch, doesn't keep his hands up, puts his hands down. I assume the police assume he's getting a weapon or something, and they kill him. So this stuff's crazy. So Corn Pop, there's a bomb threat called in every time Megan McCain is on her way to the bathroom because, oh my goodness, many people think the video kicked her off because she's a moron. Goop is saying these kids, especially young men, need to understand the getting nudie pics to get them in serious trouble. You're right, Coop. And this is where schools and communities in general, right, need to be very direct and overt on telling kids, whether it's male or female, of saying and coming in and present, and not just the principal, police, and your district attorney, attorney, right, who's going to file charges in the case, right, and come in and say, if you do this, and also give examples, like here are examples in the state, right, where this has happened, but if you do this, like this could be a consequence of you, and then also restitution, and you could be on a offenders list. I think there was something where it was even a kid as young as like 12 or 13 got on a sexual offenders list for some of this. And then, once you're on that, here's what you're going to have to do. Here's what your parents are going to have to do. And kids listen to that. Right. But what I also hear schools will be like, oh, we don't want to talk about it because then it gives kids ideas. And I hate that whole, we're not going to give an exemplar. We're not going to give a template. We're not going to give an example because people will then get an idea in their mind and they're going to follow that. I think that's a garbage excuse. I think that's a coward's way out. And I hear that so often from people. Oh, we don't want to put ideas into their mind. I'm like, this is already out there. Be very explicit. You're going to help people. You're going to help kids by doing the presentation this way, right? And answering any questions they have and their parents and things like that. Trust me, like you are much better off to do it this way than to say, well, let's hope it doesn't happen here that, the 15-year-old girl sends her 15-year-old boyfriend a picture and then it gets posted around school or vice versa or whatever it is, like and now we've got these, or they send it to a staff member and the staff member opens it up and they don't know what it is, and then they're like, they forward it to an administrator. Well, now you've just forwarded so I go through this, right? And I also tell my superintendents, I said, you should always have a notebook in your top drawer, right-hand drawer of your desk. In that notebook, you should be writing questions that you have for your school's attorney. So we always come across these things in class, and I said, here's something for the notebook. And then right now, like if we what would a professional development look like? What should we cover? Like legally, what do you know? And then and have that, right? Should we put it in policy that we're going to present this annually, or how do we link it out to policy if we do a presentation like this? But as I tell people, like this is what your state organization should be doing, which you're paying thousands of dollars to. They should already be getting it. They should be well ahead of this curve and have like template presentations available for you, like regional people who can come out and do this, like some exemplar presentations that they've given, which they've done none of this. And why don't they? Because it's controversial, right? So they're not going to dip their toe into those waters. And I'm like, I'm telling you, right, this is a huge benefit to your student body and your parents if you identify the elephant in the room and get ahead of this stuff. You're going to have much better outcomes than if you don't. So, Safety Doc, did you see the walleye fishers get caught? I did. Where they put weights inside of the fish and then also put fillets for extra weight. So if you just open the fish up, you really wouldn't. I'd probably initially see these fillets. What a scummy move, right? That's horrible. So they added weight to these fish to win, and these are like several $1,000 competitions and stuff. What a scummy thing. So, and I'm also surprised that there wasn't already a process in place to kind of gut these fish and to check for their integrity. I guess you can always, because they say, oh, now you're compromising. It can't be taxidermy won't be able to do what it needs to do. But what a scummy thing. Yeah. This is Bacon. You're not wrong about the doc. One of the things IUSD did to try curbing truancy was to start, I think it's Inglewood School District, finding the parents of the student that did. Third strike was like 206 back in 2016. So, yeah, I mean, and let's say like a student is sharing nude photos or something like that, underage and all of this stuff. The consequences on parents and where they work and their community and all of that stuff. I think it's to bring in some parents, especially if they're more local or from the state, to share some of these things. Let's say, once a child had done this, like, here's what it was like. It was hard to go shopping. We had to shop at night, right? We had to, kids listen to that type of stuff. Or a kid say, when I did this, I didn't think about any of this. And I didn't realize, right, for my whole family, and even anything that we did from shopping at a store, was bizarre, because right, this hyper scrutiny, and it's just weird that isn't okay. I'll talk to my classes and say, what do your state organizations tell you about this? And it's crickets. And then I'll say, like, have you seen this anywhere as a keynote? Well, like John Ronson, so you've been shamed. Have you seen this as a keynote? Have you seen this as a breakout? Nope, haven't seen it all. I'm like, well, that was a problem, right? Because I believe a lot of the conferences present on what they're comfortable with and what is very broad and not very deep versus what is very important and what applies to everybody but could be low instance. They don't do that. So, and I call them out on it. And I said, you should call them out on it too. I'll take some time here when we get to some of the additional conferences coming up. I'll download their, their schedule, what's happening, and we can go through and say, well, here's what's nice, right? But here's like what's important, and here's what's not being covered. So CNT, Koopa saying, one guy in Arizona got the cops called late at night, and he answered the door with his gun. The cops shot him. A couple of years ago. It was a bad shoot, and the cops should be prison, never charged. So, kind of goes into that whole swatting area. What you're saying, Coop? Yeah. Let me go here. John Rice, so terrible. This whole system needs to be burned to the ground and start over. We need a reversion. Yeah. I shared something in this week's class on Saturday. So I put up on the board and I said, there are topics you will get into as a school administrator in your board of education, because as an administrator, your job is to inform the board. And so you have to document how you've come to whatever it is, your conclusions on whether we should mask or not mask or whatever, and how you're informing the board. And then the board has to make their decision, right, on some of these big items that impact the district. But the thing is, so you never know how a board truly is going to act on these things, and you kind of got to make your move based upon, you got to inform them the best you can, whatever the decision you make, you got to live with it. But I also said, like, what do you do when you have a board that doesn't listen to you, right? They're kind of listening to what's on the news and other things, and it's really hard as a superintendent. But so document really well how you're informing your board. Corn Pop. Ian was just Mother Nature's way of resuming Florida, a seminal wind, if you will. Yeah, I remember John Anderson's song Seminole Wind that scared off the Yankees. So, let me see here. Dun, 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 dun. Andrew, I always assumed these fishing tournaments were all rigged. What would stop someone from fishing the day before and keeping a cooler on their boat? So, yeah, I mean, seems like there would be ways to do that, right? And especially you'd be out and might not have boats around you. And but we were watching the downfall of Western society. Yeah, I don't know. I personally, and I tell my like aspiring superintendents, I'm like, be a good person, right? Be good to people, and also there are ways to conduct yourself and conduct board meetings and things. These passion. So when what I put on the board was, I said, passionate topics in schools. There's a number of them, from dress code to COVID and stuff like that. But I said, when people present on passion topics, they don't go lateral. They never go laterals to inform. They never are changing their position. They go passionate, and passionate goes deep. Passion is deep roots. They will double down, triple down, quadruple down. And I said, you have to know the difference, right? If you expect people to go passionate, then you got to be careful on if you're trying to move them lateral, because that's not where they're at. You're kind of listening to them, right? And even the language you use. So it's, instead of saying like, we need to meet in the middle or something like that, like that's not good language, because you're defining the middle, right? And I tell people this, I'm like, there's so much that needs to be spent on semantics in schools and just language as like a leader of what you say. And it would be like, and I said, if you're really working with someone who's very oppositional to what you're doing, if you say, am I crazy or are we crazy to think that we can't, make a decision that will benefit all of our students? And that's not a good example, but it's an okay example. Am I crazy to think that, we can't, without being like really overt about how you present that, really animated? Because people are going to, you can respond yes or no to that. And if you allow people to respond no, you allow them to be protective. So they'll be like, well, no, it's not crazy that we can't move closer into a collective viewpoint of helping our students, right? So, right, so I'll bring these things up, right? And I'll, as a speech language pathologist and like semantics expert, I guess, and stuff like that. And I'll say, where are you getting this for your organizations? Where do you have a conference where they bring in like Chris Voss, the, head FBI negotiator international for a number of years, and these agencies, Donovan Group, and things. And like I wrote in Philosophy of Information, like the semantics of the Committee for National Morale in 1942 and what they use for words and images. And I'm like, and I said, there's so much to be learned and incorporated in your Board of Education policy or Board of Education meetings. Like even like the visuals that are up in the room should be like all like kind of students doing things, like you can get those vinyl printouts and stuff like that. And the way that you space people out in the lighting and the words that you're using. And as I just gave that no example, I'm like, these are all things that are very important. And those aren't just FBI tactics. Those are tactics in negotiation for businesses, right? And things like this. And I said, you're not getting any of that from your organizations in your conferences. Like, why not? Like, why aren't they bringing these people in of saying, if, here's, and run people through mock things like that. I do it with my students. And it changes things. Like I give them a few key phrases to use, right? That changes a narrative. But you don't see it. You don't see those things being taught. And one of my superintendents a year ago, we were talking and really getting into a deep discussion kind of outside of class of the Road to Victory, which was 1942 from the Committee for National Morale. And I said, you know what? If I were you, right, I would have these vinyl displays of what's happening in schools in a positive tone, right? That's student based. I would have these pictures, and I'd have them made up into these, 6 foot tall, whatever, these things that you can put up on stands. And I would put those around your boardroom, and I would mirror a lot of the stuff that was done in Committee for National Morale for imaging. And here's some other ways I would just conduct the meeting as the superintendent. Here's how I would lead things a little bit differently. And he did it. And he said it was the greatest thing ever, right? And I'm like, yeah, right. And I'm like, you always end every presentation. I tell people this too. I'm like, you always end every presentation you give with a slide that says, what questions do you have? And people are like, well, is that a requirement? Like, it's what you have. No, right? It's not legally mandated. You don't have to do that. But I'm like, it's a technique, right? And it also provides in discovery, if anything goes weird legally for something that you've done, a training, right, on bullying and harassment or non-discrimination or whatever it is, right? We go through that. You are demonstrating in this slide, right, that you gave people opportunity to seek clarification from the person in charge who had the knowledge, who was the presenter, versus like just delivering this out and ending it. I said that one slide has a bigger role than you will ever imagine if this comes to litigation and just in your practices. And I said that slide has a pause with it, right, of several seconds. Anything out there, any questions, any whatever on the terminology or whatever, or boom, come back to me at a different time if you've got questions. And because a lot of people don't end that, they just put the end. And I said, that's not the way to end any present, or whether it's with students, right? You're talking about if, the sending of inappropriate, photo, because we know, students, they do this, right? They send it back and forth. So you're doing this presentation and then you have this section where it's like, what are your questions? Or you get the ball rolling. Like, yeah, I mean, if you want to get the ball rolling, you can pretend like there was a question submitted ahead of time or two questions. They're say like, here's two questions that were submitted to, the counselor. And the first one was whatever. And then it kind of breaks the ice and people start to do the questions. But these are all style things. And, so when I present these, I'm like, this works. I know that this works. And here's like this source and do these things is not expensive. But these people are never coached on style by their professional agencies that they pay thousands of dollars to be a part of this group every year. Right. And it really bothers me. But again, I go back and I anchor everything I do into science and as I said, like, I'm like, well, here's like esports. And I'm like, here's not esports from my interpretation. I talked to the head of esports in my state twice. And here's a document I put together. It's 3 pages long. He proofed it and made sure like it was all accurate because it's kind of not my wheelhouse, but I want it to be available for you. Because of Title IX and because of access for individuals with disabilities and whatever. And I said, one of the things in esports, he told me straight off is there'll be districts that will have a no tolerance policy for any weapon imagery. And so if there's esports and you're fighting aliens and there's a gun that you're holding, that shoots laser beams, they'll say, we can't participate in esports because it violates our zero tolerance policy for weapons. That is in our state, right? So he's like, that immediately eliminates some of the esports options. So like, how do you get ahead of that? How do you think through that? Right. Because the game's not going to likely change. But if your district has that zero tolerance policy and they're saying, well, look at this, right? We got to suspend the kid who brought the Lego gun to school as a kindergartner, which is true. Like I had to share that in class. But here we have a game, where someone has a whatever gun and they're shooting laser beams at aliens and, or whatever it is. Right. And so it's not you're not playing Call of Duty as esport. Right. But, so we can't participate in esports because of this. I don't know, really that's where you're going. I mean, your school has like, you're also your school has an, maybe a rifle team or whatever like that. So I get where people are going on this, but right, they got to think about this and they've got to square this and right the ship early. And that's where if a superintendent is informed and they make a distinct thing, this is where, again, these state organizations, if they would just come out and say, we are aware that, there are, some weapons or whatever that are used in a cartoonish manner in some of these games and things, but these aren't people that are depicted and whatever. And here's what we view and take a position as the benefits of esports and getting students involved in extracurriculars and whatever, but they won't do that. Right. So again, as soon as I point out these things and these organizations are just like, kind of blowing in the wind, they're not going to get into this because they don't want to be brought up. But anyway, so, well, thank you for being here, Benning Ballistics. I appreciate it. No phones working here on Thursday because of Ian Corn Pop. Gotcha. So let me go through here. Horn Pop. Way down south in the Everglades where the Blackwater rolls and sawgrass plays, eagle flies and the otter plays. Linus Seminole. John Anderson, right? John Anderson. Yeah, it's good. I have that song. I left my heart in Sarasota. It's Bolo. Yet they fire t-shirt cannons at the people during ball games. Good point, Ron. Ron Wayne. Good point, right? This is the hypocrisy of some of these things, right? You're absolutely right. So you go to, you're like, you can't do this. We can't participate in esports. And you're like, okay, but like we have the t-shirt cannon, right? That that is brought out, at the football games or the basketball games, and or we sent the student high school down to the state tournament where they're shooting the t-shirt cannons into the crowd. You're right, Ron. Like there's this whole weird double standard on things, right? On these. So that's a really good point. Actually, I'll come back and I'm going to note that when I come back to that in class, and say, not only like, what if this happens in your district, which is, those have been around, or the potato cannons or whatever those things. Not that you're shooting potato cannon at your crowd, but the students have these. But what if your students are going to basketball? They go to a Bucks game, right? Here in Milwaukee, not where I live. I don't live in Milwaukee, but that would be closest. This is happening. So yeah, baking the Pop-Tart. There was an elementary student who ate a Pop-Tart, and when it was done, and apparently it looked like a gun, and the kid got suspended for that, which I think is ridiculous. So when I wrote the feature article for Phi Delta Kappa, which comes out October 24th, I had that. I took it out before because I didn't want to give like one example that people could kind of like try to debunk. I had there's a strategy in writing like that type of article, but that was definitely there. But I still have soups to this day that have these zero tolerance policies. And I'm like, well, what would you do? Well, I'm like, don't suspend. What the hell are you doing? Like, it's a kindergarten student. Like, you don't do that. You just don't do that. So, and what discretion do you have to interpret your policy and best interest of the student? And again, it's like it's the district, and I think it was Pennsylvania, that had a kindergarten student brought a gun that was the size of a Lego. It was part of the Lego kit, for whatever he had, and he brought to school, and he got suspended off of the bus for a few days for that. So I'm like, I don't know, like maybe there's a lot more to that story, but wow. So let's do this. Type here. That'll be nicer. I'm so looking forward to this headset coming in. Kindergarten student. Oh. Yeah, I don't know. Let me try to find this here. It's got to be Lego. That's what it was. You can find these like all over the internet, though, if you do a search. So, yeah, here, let me bring it up. Let's share screen. Yes, I do want to share the screen. God's sakes, could you put more ads on here? Jeez. Let's make this bigger. Okay, so here's the title. I made it a little too big. Kindergartner given detention for bringing this tiny Lego figure gun on a school bus. This is from the Daily Mail, but a 6-year-old kindergartner sparked an uproar on a Massachusetts school. Yeah, this is the one. He was spotted brandishing a tiny plastic Lego gun on a school bus last week. Mika Crane, the child's mother, insisted that officials at Old Mill Pond Elementary School in Palmer overreacted when another student saw the gun, which is slightly bigger than a quarter, alerted the driver. So there's a gun. There's a quarter. So this got him kicked off the bus. The driver said he caused quite a disturbance on the bus. The children were traumatized. No. I guess there's a school. In the aftermath of the incident, the school sent a letter home to parents explaining what had happened, stressing there was no actual firearm. The missive was accompanied by a photo of the black toy gun showing its actual diminutive size. That's probably a good move by the district to do that. Crane's son has been forced to write a letter of apology to the bus driver. I don't know. As a kindergartner, what kind of letter are you writing? So, that's interesting. He was also given detention Tuesday and could be temporarily stripped of his busing privileges. I could see if it was, an airsoft gun or something. It's just a toy, the mother said. Student who yelled about the toy gun on the bus also had to issue an apology, which both the child's mother and Crane believe was a mistake because the kid should be able to speak up without seeing something suspicious. That's his mom? Well, that's interesting. Okay. All right. Anyway, school did not respond to comments. Didn't comment. I don't know. Probably not the photos I would want if I was a mom. Apparently Facebook. So interesting. So this is where schools, I think, make bad decisions because of zero tolerance policies, right? And this is one of those things where if it repeatedly happen, okay, we're not going to embrace a culture of you repeatedly bringing this onto a bus or onto school premises. But if it's one time or whatever, and this is a kindergartner, seems, again, this is a quarter. This is obviously right from face validity, not a threat to anybody. So a quarter is a threat. You can choke on the quarter, but not to make light of this. This is the type of thing that zero tolerance policies really trip you up. Everybody talks discretion until something like this happens, and they just go with their zero tolerance policy. So, John, I'm so scared I'll die from computerized illustrations of weapons. And Corn Pop, Sarasota has broken many hearts, particularly the one half Puerto Rican, half German girl. My goodness. So, John Rice, hey, buddy, take care. What am I trying to move along here? Andrew, schools have the sign that is shaped like a gun and the red circle and line through it's in gun-free zone. Yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, right? I wrote an article once. I don't know which journal it was in. And I just said, or maybe I published it in School of Errors, but I said, again, like that doesn't do anything to prevent violence in schools, especially gun violence. But I said, what it does is it creates, whoever's your landscaper that has to mow around that's a pain for them. But I said, the gun-free zone thing, originally, why it was enacted was to provide an extra, it's kind of like getting Al Capone on, tax evasion. It's trying, if there's some loophole for some person with a gun on school premises and shooting or whatever, that you would have this as another way to bring up charges. So that's ultimately what was behind that, but it's just crazy. It's It's interesting too, because I know a number of administrators and school folks that can still carry with the permission of their school boards. So I'm not a big fan of Pop-Tarts myself, spam bot fodder. By the way, this channel, when it gets monetized, be the first person who could donate 10 cents. Yeah, I'm not. My wife makes homemade Pop-Tarts for our daughters. So, but I'm not a big fan of that. Of like purchased Pop-Tarts. I've never been into the Pop-Tarts. Yeah, G.I. Joe graphics. Holy smokes, you're right. Man, oh man. Daily Mail, yeah, I don't know. There's other websites. That's just the first one that came up, but Bacon is saying, imagine my disappointment when I found out it wasn't for giving away free guns, the gun-free zone. So, wow. Yeah. This is the thing, Mrs. Wayne. Yeah, the zero tolerance stuff is, well, first of all, zero tolerance is bad. So let's take it even away from guns from this standpoint and things like pointing fingers and, if it's a first grader or something like that. But zero tolerance. So let's say that a student we talked about this in class on Saturday, a student with a seizure epilepsy disorder is prescribed CBD oil by a doctor. And the school has a no CBD oil policy, depending upon the state that they're in. But the school has a policy like that. But, the school nurses said, I'm not going to administer this, right? Because I could lose my state license for administering a controlled substance. And, and then the question comes in, well, if it has more than 0.3 THC in it, then it's considered like marijuana, and then you could get in trouble and stuff. But you can go down all these rabbit holes. And at the end of the day, you've got a student with epilepsy who has a doctor's order and has evidence of fewer seizures for the duration and the intensity of the seizures because of the CBD oil. What do? And most people come to the realization of, well, you let the kid have you have the CBD oil. I mean, because it's prescribed and it is providing the student to be in school and receiving. But what if your policy, right, says no CBD oil? So people have to kind of write those ships. We had archery club in high school. Whatever happened to learning really important stuff? Yeah. We had like debate teams before I got to high school, and they were gone. They were on the TV at 6:00 at night, Channel 7. Spambot. When I was in kindergarten, I built a catapult out of my Meccano set. We had a blast launching chalk. The teacher participated. You wouldn't see it. I remember when I was in elementary school, we had catapults that we built in a science class, and we took them to the gym, and we had to launch different things like a ping pong ball and other stuff. And the one that went the furthest, right? Like I think we got awards for that, but you worked in teams, and it was pretty cool. Like I now that you mentioned, I remember that, right? I don't think you would be doing that stuff today. So Ron, we have pellet guns and practice drills with Grans in junior ROTC or JROTC when I was in school. So sad things have changed. Our school district here has a rifle club. I know there's a formal name for it. I can't think of it right now. Which is, I think, good. C&T to Runwing. There are not really school shootings back then. Times have changed and common sense has gone out the window. So, yeah, school shootings and just, I don't know, societal violence is kind of, it's just really, really strange. Like, I don't know, what was it? Arlington Heights, Chicago, and the person opens up and shooting people just at random, and it's really disturbing. Like, there was a kid, elementary kid, who's paralyzed from the waist down, and I've been reading a little bit because it's not that far from where we're at, and he's like, just the kid feels robbed of being able to play in a little league and all this stuff. And appropriately so, right? Like, it's this stuff is really, but I'm much more in the camp lately that the news, and I wrote about this in Velocity of Information, right? The news is typically garbage, especially the mainstream news, and they just tend to amplify the worst of what's happening. And there's a lot of good that's happening. Like right now, there's a lot of good happening in Florida, organically, with people in Florida helping each other and people coming in Cajun Navy. You don't hear anything about that, right? So I even thought about, what would it look like if I was to make a Twitter handle and every day post out like only good things that are happening. I don't know what that would look like, right? I'd have to I think of a format and stuff like that. But I think people are so sick of this. That's the thing too. Like, I think people see through a lot of this stuff. Was it Neil McCoy, right, who I follow, posted the Italian, prime minister, or whatever, the lady who got voted in, and he took like 30 major media outlets from around the world, and he took their talking points, and they were identical from one to another. Like, this would be the worst person ever, and this is the new Mussolini, but the thing was, it was verbatim, right? And it was made to scare people. And again, I don't know this person. I haven't really, researched and whatever, but it was like this position statement was scripted. And then people are just supposed to tell you what you're supposed to think about this new prime minister of Italy. So CNT saying there was a school district that said they would not do CBD because the students would be in internal possession of drugs. Interesting. So this is a case study I have in my class, and we addressed it on Saturday because there were two instances where children with epilepsy disorder were denied CBD oil, even though it had been prescribed by a doctor. And both of the courts, Circuit Court 6, I think, I forget the other one, had ruled in favor of the student, saying the district was wrong in not allowing the student to have this. And so, but again, I go back. So this is what I do in the case study. I go with I could probably bring it up here. Let's see. So I have this as a case study with my students. And, again, it seems like it's very clear initially, which is not true. And this is where you have to apply discretion. You have to use best interest. And you have to look at your Board of Education policy. And so let me see if I can find it here. Dun, 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 dun. Where did I have it? I've got the class up here on the left. God, I thought I had it in the morning. Where do I have it here? Come on. Jeez. Athletes, optional, Title IX, CBD oil. Here we go. All right. So yeah, I had CBD oil in schools. So then every person had to check their policy, and some schools had it, some didn't. And then also, so what does it mean, right? What if it was something your school nurse said, I'm not going to administer this because if it's more than 0.3 THC, it's a felony. And I'm administering a controlled substance to students. I could lose my license. I could, might not work again. And the thing is, like, CBD oil typically isn't through a pharmacy, so how do where do you play this middle road? And so I go through and I bring up like the state nurse, our Department of Public Construction, right? The nurse, the statement is from 2018, 4 years ago, basically saying, we understand your apprehensions and it's kind of up to you, right? So always leave it to the district. Don't give any guidance. I brought up some rulings from different states on this. New Mexico was one. I brought up some guidance from Texas on that from their state school organization, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which does not allow CBD in schools. But we brought these things up, right? And I said, what are a few things you notice? Well, one is all the stuff that came out from like the state organizations and the Department of Instruction are old. Yeah, I'm like, they're old. They're like 4 years old, like, right? They're not giving you any updated guidance or position statements on this. So they're leaving it up to you. They're not going to take a stance on this, which isn't unusual. I don't think it's strong leadership on their part, but it's not unusual. And then, so let's go through your hierarchy here of discretion and best interest. What do you think you should do? And what would you do, if this happened? And they're coming out with data and, the physician and stuff like that. Granted, your school nurse is accurate in saying, I don't know I can't verify this CBD oil, right? Because it's not coming from a pharmacy. And there's a chance because CBD oil has to have the THC removed. It could have more than 0.3. But if it does, like, what's the consequence, right? And so, I'm trying to get people to make a decision on this. And most people come around to a decision of, I'm going to act in the best interest of this child, use my professional discretion, and say, we will administer this because the physician, and they have documented records of saying the child has fewer seizures and they're less severe. And so child can be at school, and they're also having, if you don't do this, there's the likelihood of more severe intensity of a seizure and longer duration of a seizure, and that child's not going to be in school. And then also, like, what is your really negative outcome from this? What if there is some THC that's in the CBD oil? I mean, just what if, like, because someone said, well, our resource officer can check for this. I'm like, yeah, your resource officer could check if there's THC present, but they wouldn't be able to check if there's 0.3. That's a lab. They have a test that says whether it's present or not how much. So, you kind of get, and then, people get a little bit, they're like, well, why aren't our state organizations telling us this? Why is the Department of Public Construction not updating their statement on this? And so I said, you've got to make decisions on this stuff, right? And back it up. And I said, I'm not telling you what to do, right? I'm not your boss, but if this was me, this is what I would do. And I would back it up in best interest of the student. I'm using my professional discretion. If it's an issue, believe I got the board and back me. But it's these type of things, right? Nobody does a case study like this and everyone's like, holy smokes. And I'm like, this is real. This happens. So, and if you've got this zero CBD policy and there's not a consideration for a student with epilepsy, right? That's a mistake. You got to fix the policy. I'm very clear on that. That's one thing. Like, I am very clear on these things. And I do this more in class than I did in the past, where I'll say, here's what I would do. I don't like to do that because I don't like to, I want people to kind of figure this out on their own, but I'll let it go so long. And then if it kind of isn't going anywhere, I'll say, well, here's what I would do and here's why. And then hopefully, again, it's a primacy effect, which Graham Wilson talked about a couple weeks ago on our show, the pilot. And, you have to lead by example. And I think as a professor, I have to lead by example. But look at this here from Bolo. My dad met my mom on a blind date because he achieved marksman M14 and got a weekend off. Well, that is cool. Whoa, that is a cool story. I'd follow you and share everyone. Laugh out loud. So who's that? Too. That's kind of cool. Misty Mrs. Wayne. Sounds like a great idea, Doc. So I see Neil McCoy, the singer, at the store from a nice guy. Whoa, look at that. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have McCoy. He's a YouTuber from, he's former military. I like him in Great Britain. I don't know. I can't find the link to his. He's a good guy. When you watch Congress, CT says, when you watch Congress, you get the story and the media picks it up and runs with it. Yes. Andrew, Michael Malice loves to say that the media never puts subtitles on Hitler's speeches, implying that people might like the message. Interesting. I hadn't heard that before. So John Rice, Matthew McConaughey went to school here, but plays like he didn't. Wow. We can make our own CBD oil up here in Canada, says Bolo. So yeah, our state is our governor wants to legalize kind of marijuana and more broadly CBD, and I guess wherever they go with that. It's, as I said to people in the case study, it's kind of irrelevant for the case. Well, I guess it's not irrelevant because then you would likely have more standing or whatever. I don't know. But there's just something where you look at things and you're like, this is the right thing to do. And people know that. And as I told everybody in class, I'm like, you know what to do when the student gets lost with autism and is wandering in a woods near a lake. You know that you got to go out there and find the kid, right? You got to do what you have to do. You don't stop because there's a no trespassing sign. Like, again, I can say this as a professor, it's not legal advice. I'm not their boss, but I said, you know what to do though, right? Like you do know what to do, and you know what to do in the CBD case study, which seems really complicated. Right. But you also know when these things went up to circuit courts, that the circuit courts back the parents and saying the districts need to administer this, the CBD oil. And you also know that in your heart of hearts, like that's the right thing to do. And as an administrator, right. And if it conflicts with your policy, then you got to adapt your policy. So, but I look at that. I'm like, where's your state where's the update from your state organization or your Department of Public Instruction on this? One time, the Department of Public Instruction, I don't know, I think if it was IP, Individualized Education Plan forms or whatever, but I said to them, why don't you have some templates out there? Could have been that, could have been allergy management or something, but I talked with somebody or emailed somebody, or I was pretty adamant and said, why don't we have some examples? And I was willing to provide examples. Be glad to do that. Like on a school safety report, like I'll provide objectives, right? I'll give you that for free, that people could do, like checking our two-way radios for your report that's due January 1st, stuff like that. And the response was, well, if we do that, then everybody will we'll just reproduce it, and 421 districts will submit the same thing. And I was like, wow, that's a bad answer. That's really a bad answer on your part. And the other fact is, you're assuming everybody's an idiot then, right? That people wouldn't know that this is a template, this is an exemplar, that they can adapt it and modify it for their own context and situation, right? For you to say, what you're really telling me though, is you're telling me, I don't want to put this out there because what if I'm wrong? And what if I share something and now I'm wrong and I shared it with 421 districts and they did something wrong? That's what you're saying. And if you are, then you are. Then if you're wrong, you say, well, we're informed and we'll change it. But let's be clear on the message that what you're trying to say is, we're not going to do this because then everybody will copy it, and it will be convergent versus divergent, and all of this stuff. Like, yeah. Again, what you're saying is, I'm unwilling to go out on a limb and put some things out. And if that's where you're at, then at least, right, allow some districts to have a toolbox like they do in REMS and share some of this information out, that they can put it out there so other districts at least know it's there and they can adapt it for their own use if they want. Not that you have to endorse it necessarily, right? But my God, don't be so damn cowardly to endorse and put a template out there for people who really need it in these districts, right? And to be the clearinghouse and to be the curator of the toolbox like REMS ED. Like that just boggles my mind. Again, it's just not the way that I operate. And that's where I'm very strongly advocating to my aspiring school leaders, when you have the chance, right, and or to make the chance to be heard, these are some things you can change, right, collectively. The Department of Public Instruction to add a toolbox section, which is very similar to REMS ED, where people can submit documents or forms or whatever, or templates of policies, or so other people can benefit from these. But just the way I am, all the way. CT, the Federal Department of Public Instruction should be abolished. I agree with that. I completely agree. And I think they should salt the land where it's at so nothing grows there. But Department of Ed education should be handled at a state level. Department of Education for school safety has been horrible, right? So we have the Safer Communities bill that came out at a federal level, and you can say, well, it's not a Department of Education bill. Well, I get that, right? But Department of Education is part of safer, I don't know, schoolsafety.gov and whatever. But the school safety from a federal level, there's nothing going on. The Fed dumped out $1 billion for mental health, but no framework on how to do that at a state level. So let the states be in special education. When special education was passed in 1975, right, the Fed said, oh, we'll pay 40% that we'll give to your states, which was flow through dollars, comes to states. They pay 15%, leave the states on the hook for 25%, which is, in my state, between that and not having the 60% state funding, there was $1 billion deficit last year that the districts had to make up. So, yeah, I am not a fan of the Department of Public Instruction at a federal level. I think that should all be state level. And again, when I was in the 70s, that came about. I'm with you. I'm with you on that. Drug-free zone, but Ritalin and Adderall, yeah, right. So people would bring that up during class, Andrew, and they would say, well, we have a number of, kids that receive, controlled substances by medical order. Or what if a student, a parent sends a liquid form of whatever in a bottle from a pharmacy? How do we know that hasn't been altered by the parent? So I don't know, right? But these are all to build off this. One of the things I did when I was a school administrator, we bought gun cabinets for our schools to house all of these medications which were coming in because we thought the schools could be targets for people coming in and breaking in and trying to steal these things. So yeah, it was pretty crazy back then. I'm sure it's even crazier now. So Ron, your good news ideas, tweet sent to safety doc. Good idea. I like that. I don't know if it'd be a safety doc could put that out, or if there would be like a different Twitter account or something, but I think there's a lot of merit in that. I don't know how I would inform that, right? Like what the input, what the sources would be on that. Now I kind of like Southern Prepper 1, but he does like boots on the ground. People tell him, oh, things that are happening are usually negative things. And maybe like some people could like email things of like, here's good things happening or whatever, or, but I think like if you just even did like one a day, and something like even like, hey, 3D printers can, print catheters during an emergency. And this is like an awesome thing or whatever. And, or, we keep going down the line of some of the good, of the good news stuff. I don't know if that's what I would lead off with, but I think there's a lot to that. I think like that would be popular. And I think it's necessary. I'm not trying to do it to like become famous as a channel. I'm trying to do it because I think it's necessary. I don't know what that looks like. I'll think about it more. And if anybody has an idea, post it down below in the comments or get a hold of me. And, but I think there's stuff to that. And as I teach my students, like I always bring up like the happiness report, which sounds crazy, but that's a well-researched study every year on, like if you lose your wallet, the question, what would you rather have? So let's say you had a salary that met your needs. So let's say it was $70,000 or something. Would you have double your salary, or to live in an area where you knew if your wallet was lost, someone would return it to you and it would have everything still in it? 4-1 people said, I would rather live in an area where my wallet would be returned versus doubling my salary, right? So there are really important things to kind of learn about human motivation. And so like one of my soups brought this up in class, and we're talking about, you can pay, like Des Moines, Iowa paid people $50,000 bonus to teach this year, some people. And he said, but statistics will show you that when people leave somewhere, 3% will say because it was the money, the compensation wasn't enough. Like other people, it's like culture, work hours, or stuff like this. And I say that's a good point. That's a really good point, right? Like, if you recruit people in for big money into some positions, the likelihood they're going to stay, I don't know. I just the math and the stats don't show that out, or don't kind of prove that out. So, taxation is theft. No kidding. I was talking to my neighbor today about my property taxes went up 16%. I'm assuming his did the same. And kind of like 2 months from now, I'll probably be getting my tax bill. And I'm like, geez, like it is not going to be good news. Unless the trespassing sign is upside down. Yeah. I took that photo. I was biking past that, and then I stopped. I'm like, I got to take this photo of that sign upside down. You can walk on your hands. So let's see here. Ask Henry Thoreau, says Bolo. See, Koopa's saying to John, we should pay something to fund things like the armed forces, but we should never pay what we do now. I do lean more toward where you're coming from. Yeah. I go back, like I kind of think too of like the student loan stuff going on, like the student loan payment of $1,000 or whatever. But, like the student loan stuff was really like a college stimulus plan is what that was. That was meant to build out the colleges and the faculty. I think more than to quote unquote benefit the students. So for years, that money was just pushing, bloating out higher education. Ron Wayne, we enjoyed your tree cutting. That was that was the guy who cut the neighbor's tree stump down. And stuff like that, right? So we have a couple lakes in our town, and I can, like, when I do a walk in winter, I can walk by them. I was thinking I would like to go out, because there's always like ice shanties on from like, January to March. And I'd like to go out and just like do an interview of like someone who's like just ice fishing, or just like a short clip. We also have a dude in town who has a Ghostbusters car, but it's actually a minivan. It's not in that great a shape, but he does have all of the Ghostbusters gadgets on it. And I saw him like a couple days ago at Walmart, but by the time I parked, I was going to go up to him and like try to do like a YouTube short of say like, hey, like, you are the person to ask, how was Elvis? And have you seen him lately? And I'm sure like that, come on, if you got that, you're probably playing along with me on that thing. But he took off like before I got up there. But I saw him today, but then he wasn't around. The vehicles just kind of parked outside of grocery stores. So But I'm like, that's pretty cool, man. You got a Ghostbusters car here in town, and your Ghostbusters van. You're going around. Like, I like that. I'm for that. That's a good thing. So, Bolo's saying, not to gloat, but I planted at least 10 trees over the weekend. It's a good deal. Like, I think a couple of years ago, it was like, I looked up how much oxygen a typical tree produces. It was pretty remarkable. So Misty Mrs. Wayne, they are all about taking the taxes, but not giving them back. File our tax return in February. I had one tax return. It took me literally 20 months to get. So nothing crazy with it, Misty Mrs. Wayne. It was just inefficiency on the IRS. It took 20 months to get the return. They did pay interest, but still it's kind of like, what in the world? Taxes equal the government telling you how much you owe them, or they take your guns and stuff. Yeah, right. If you don't pay your property or pay your taxes, they'll take your property. So Bolo, they're planting. I have a fire bush, who I showed you in that picture from my house, that I'm going to move. I think I'll be okay with if I do it early in spring. I just need to move it like 20 inches closer to the road. It's 15 feet from the road. So, but, so let's see. Da-da-da. Nice. Look at this. Bolo's planting trees. I have 2 spruce in the back. My dad brought them down in a 5-gallon pail, each one of them. They're probably like 2-3 feet tall. Now, this was 20 years ago, those trees are 50 to 60 feet tall, and each one is 20 feet wide. So it's a benefit of sandy soil. Stuff grows like crazy here. So yeah, well, they paid me 5%. Well, because it was late, but still it's kind of weird. I don't know. Wasn't a big fan of that. I was just, at some point, I was just glad I got the money, because I was like, what is going on here? So, let's go back to the hell. I got to burn a lot of pictures over to CDs and clean up my, what am I doing here? So here's the, let's do this. Open. Okay. So for context here, this is the slab I had replaced. So, or I am having replaced. So this was all taken out, and this was just on sand, but this is like an inch higher, and this is an inch lower, but the new slab will be 4 inches down from the siding. And this is actually, you can't really tell, but this is 6 to 7 inches down. So the new one will be 4 inches. It'll be 2 inches below here. So we'll have a nice slope. But this was acting, because this is tilting in at a pretty steep angle, and this was messing. You can see here with the foundation. Now the foundation's 8 inches wide, and it goes down 4 feet. So this is kind of surface stuff, but I had to get this thing out of there because the sand underneath it was gone. And here again, the 2 outlets. But it's pretty, there's some, can't really see them. It's all steel. So it's supposed to be hurricane grade siding, but the problem, and it's held up really well for 12 years. I'm glad I did it, but yeah, if you get any dense steel siding, you're screwed. So that's just the way that it is. You're not gonna really mitigate that. So let's take a look here so you guys can see so this is as they were taking it out. You can see what they were doing here, and this was all sand. And then and you can look at this. So we hadn't had rain in a long time. You could see the moisture underneath, because then over here was like clay and dirt. We don't have clay down here. So because this didn't have a base, you could just see the water that was underneath, and this stuff was, and then it only went that far, but this was just acting as a fulcrum up against here, and especially winter and freeze and thaw, and it's just a big mess. So yeah, they were able to get all of this, and then again, they just point out what was kind of the obvious is it was just poorly put down. But let me see if I have a really good angle here. So I don't know. I think this is probably my best one. Let's do this one so we can see the firebush. So tomorrow, and by putting this all the way over, this is still 6 inches on my property. Because up here, well, there's the marker. No, not that. You can see it from the garage. There's the marker over on the other side there. Put in from the surveyor last year because I before I had any of this done, I needed a survey. And yeah, there's the drop off here is a little more pronounced, but that's on purpose to make sure we have draining away from the foundation. And then this is pretty level. So I mean, we're dropping down 1/8 of an inch for every foot here, so it gets a. But again, this is going to be there. This represents I don't know how many cubic yards of gravel. It's really crazy. There's a ton of gravel in here. Like they were hauling an entire afternoon because this was dug down significantly. So this gravel, that came in here as a base. So we don't have. So obviously you can see we don't have the water issue because the water is going to wick down and not up through that other stuff. And there's isn't a basement obviously under the garage. So there's nothing to deal with there. And there's actually not a basement on that side of the house. But yeah, so this will be a nice area to put a grill. I can also kind of see this, envision this as an area to put my bike and put down, put down a big cloth right here, kind of like a canvas thing and do like bike maintenance out here in summer. Like I just envision this as being kind of almost a work area too. Like I can put my sawhorses out here because, right, if you put them out here, you got to move them when you are bringing your vehicles in. But if I put them out here and I'm doing stuff, so I just see this as being such a nice work area for me. But so, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Wayne, take care. Thank you so much for following the show and all of the thumbs up and the subscriptions and watch hours. I appreciate it. Week from today, Megan Usui on the show. That is going to be a great one. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah. And so let me get this out of here. Let me do a wrap up because I want to get to bed too. This has been great. Look forward to I look forward to a week from today again. Megan, that show will be starting at 7:00. And what motivates people to seek fitness? And this isn't some like pitch for a program or something. We had worked on this as a show to kind of inform the chapter into the philosophy of information. And Megan's going to talk about, and again, she's done this for 30 plus years. She's going to here's if you're young, like what motivates you like a kid. Here's what motivates like somebody who's 20 or someone who's like 40 or 60 or someone working as a group trying to get fit or a family. Or does it really make a difference if like there's been a close call, like does a pandemic motivate you to get fit? Does someone close to you has like a heart attack and they were young, right? And they died, like they're 50 or something. Does that motivate you to get fit? So she has all of this stuff and she's going to talk about it. And then we are going to pretend we're on this committee for fitness and fortitude and what would we have done in March of 2020. So that's going to be pretty cool. So CT, well, thank you, buddy. Appreciate you. Appreciate that. Thanks. Good. Also, let me take us out the same way I take us in and a couple other things there. So, whoa, I gotta get back to here. So thank you, everybody. And on Monday, I will be using the new headset. So I'm excited about that. All right. Very cool. Okay. Take care, everybody.
As chaos erupts, torrents of conflicting yet urgent messages gush from media outlets. What is the magnitude of the incident, and what should people do to protect themselves? Dr. David Perodin clarifies human behavior during days, weeks, months, or even years of chaos. Reporter James David Dixon of the Detroit News proclaims, "The velocity of information is an education in the way people react and adapt to change. Never has it been more important to sift facts and stories for truth and meaning. The velocity of information will teach you how people have done it in history, in the modern day, and even in prison. There are teachable moments on every page." Buy The Velocity of Information, Human Thinking During Chaotic Times. Available from your favorite bookstore or online retailer. A must-read for parents, teachers, and taxpayers. Dr. David Perodin has written the most honest book about the $3 billion school safety industrial complex. Attorney James Sibley proclaims, "A brave demonstration of speaking truth to power. School of Errors rips the lid off the billion-dollar school safety industry." Using real-world examples of successful responses in desperate situations, David contrasts the expensive window dressings pitched to panic parents with the inexpensive and effective approaches proven to actually work. Read this book before you let your school waste another precious dollar on meaningless safety theater. Buy the international bestseller School of Errors, Rethinking School Safety in America, now at Barnes & Noble or Amazon.
Describe the odor. Is it like when something electrical is burning? And so on. Ridiculous, right? We don't shift the investigation to the reporter, but that's covertly what the school district thought needed to happen to prevent their investigation scrambling principals from burning out. And as this paragraph smolders, it would be prudent to consider bringing students with disabilities from the sidelines of safety and center them to active roles of detecting and reporting threats. So we had a rather difficult meeting. Upon due diligence of examining the reporting system, I informed the district representative that I could not justify modifications to the existing model, as such changes would make the system less accessible to students. Well, that was a short chit-chat. The district folks believed, or hoped, that the threat input system could be modified and maintained with fidelity. I wasn't in alignment with that hypothesis, and so I was thanked and given notice that our partnership would be over at month's end. Business is business, but in school safety, it's never as simple as that.
How were the beans and chili that you had for breakfast?
They were delicious. Thank you for asking. But now I am very gassy.
I'm sorry to hear that. Who let the frogs out? Pew, that stinks very bad. I have to open the window. Oh no, my cap flew off and it was sucked into the engine.
Holy smokes, the engine just cut out. We should use the Decide model to help us make the right decision.
Mayday, Mayday. I am declaring a beans and chili emergency. Please advise for landing.
Flight 019er, 2 miles northeast, turn left at 90, maintain 4,800 to establish an approach. Engine 5, dispatch, pockets of fire